farm has been reinvented in the last 3 months. Like, I cannot underestimate to you how much of a change has happened. And what it shows to me is that when there's will and dedication and capability, miracles can be done. And so I think I want to encourage you all to think about the future we want. Hub Culture and Future of Cities are working together. We're imagining Hub City, some ideas around that. We're imagining a partnership in Miami where we're going to be part of the innovation hub that's opening soon, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But there's so much we can do together if we put our mind to it. And this is why Tony brought you all here, is to put our minds to it. So let's hear it for Mr. Cho.
Thank you, Stan. Truly a brother and a aligned compadre in this this fight against climate change and for a more regenerative and equitable future that we all know is possible. And I feel like we're in a room of friends, of brothers and sisters who are all doing incredible things around the world. So I feel privileged and honored to be with each of you, and each one of you hold such an important key to the solution. And I think I want to thank everybody who has participated and come here to make this event successful, and to support Stan for the work that he's been doing since 20th anniversary. Let's give Stan a huge round of applause. And as many of you may have experienced, you know, there are certain challenges of doing business and organizing events in this part of the world, and the internet hasn't been exactly what we want, but all of those challenges present new opportunities for us to reconnect and communicate. So I'll give you a brief background of why I'm here, but really it's in service of each of you. I was born on an interfaith intentional ashram that my grandmother started in the 70s. She adopted me at birth. My parents were too young and were going to have an abortion. They were not together. My grandmother said, over my dead body, I'm going to allow that to happen. We have a community, we have a village, and we're going to raise you. And when I was 2, she remarried a Korean martial arts master. Hence the name Tony Cho. People are like, you're not Korean. And I'm like, no, you're not Chinese, you're Korean. And I say, no, I'm Korean. And people are like, well, you don't look Asian. And I'm like, I'm not, but I was adopted. And so I was bar mitzvahed, I was baptized, I was blessed by the Dalai Lama. So either I'm confused or liberated, but I'm probably a combination of both. So I think that really has informed, and then I actually ran away as quickly as I could after being schooled at the ashram. And I went to school at Northwestern. I wanted to be president of the United States so that I could have the most impact and help change the world. Boy, was I delusional at that moment that I would be able to, pursue that line of work. But I think that now I'm really starting to find my dharma in what I'm doing after all this experience. And so naturally, after leaving Northwestern, I became a nightclub promoter in Miami and Argentina and around the world. And I got to go through my Sid Arthur's reverse journey and experience Kamala's garden and the whole material world after being in the spiritual world, and force-fed spirituality as a kid. But I think, and then after that, pretty much what I ended up doing is starting to get into real estate in the urban core in Miami. And I started working with the creative class and the artists and the innovators. And I had this aha moment when I was working in Wynwood, and I had bought my first apartment for $60,000 in what's now the Performing Arts District in Miami. And I had to borrow the money because I didn't have the money, so I borrowed the money at 11% from a loan shark in Hialeah. And a year later, I ended up selling that apartment that I bought for $60,000 for $180,000. And at that moment, I had this aha moment, how art and culture could impact real estate values in a positive way and a negative way. And so I became very intimately involved in the creation of the Wynwood Arts District in Miami. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a street art district in Miami that has been celebrated all over the world. And what was beautiful about that is that the artists started to develop a relationship with the property owners. And so there was this beautiful interplay between the artist culture and the commerce culture. And we ended up, designing this really incredible master plan for Wynwood with the community, with the artists, with the city, and it was one of the most successful public-private partnerships that I've seen. And so it was really exciting to be part of that whole process. But then I started to witness the ugly side effects or unintended consequences of gentrification and cultural misappropriation. And I said, well, yes, I'm making money and we're successful and we're bringing a lot of attention through art and culture to these districts, but the very heart and soul and the independent brands that made these neighborhoods can no longer afford to be part of it. And I said, this is a flaw in our system. This is a fundamental flaw in capitalism, in real estate, and it needs to be changed. And that was the inquiry that led me to creating the Future of Cities. And the Future of Cities is a big vision. Our vision is to impact 1 billion people through innovations in the built environment. And what we like to say at Future of Cities is that we're the soft medicine. We're the software. There's a lot of hardware solutions and materiality and technology and all of that stuff. But really the only way we believe that we can co-create regenerative cities and communities and eco-villages and neighborhoods of the future are through participatory co-design with the community, for the community, and by the community. Otherwise, there is absolutely no way that we're going to eliminate inequality. We're going to create cities that are truly diverse and equity and people are thriving. And so a lot of the concepts we talk about are not popular, cross-generational and mixed income neighborhoods and having affordable housing, attainable housing mixed with higher income housing. But to me, that's the only way forward. You can't separate rich and poor, people of different classes, different religions, different colors, what have you. And so what we've been working on is open sourcing a new framework called regenerative placemaking, because we had been involved in a lot of placemaking exercises. Tony Goldman was one of my mentors, who was one of the fathers and pioneers of Soho and Philadelphia and Miami Beach and then Wynwood as well. And I learned a lot from him, and he really brought art and culture to revitalize these areas. But then inevitably, the private equity firms and the capitalist forces came into play, and the very energy and essence and heart and soul of those neighborhoods were squeezed out. And so I think none of us really want that to be the environment and the cities and the communities that we live in. And the only way to avoid that is to not be prescriptive, but to build capacity within those communities to help provide education and platforms and a hand up, not a handout, right? And so that's what regenerative placemaking is all about. It's basically about engaging with the community, listening, deep listening, learning, working with them, and allowing them to co-design their best outcome, empowering them, investing in local developers, empowering, we're working in Jacksonville, in an underserved African American community, where we're investing in minority and women-run investment development companies that are going to help us put together all the affordable housing pieces, put together all the social programming pieces, leveraging blockchain and Web3 to create a metaverse and a digital twin where they can be involved, have tokens, and be educated. And it can be about them, not about neo-colonizers or other people with other ideas. It's great to have ideas, but who am I to say that my ideas is better for that community than their idea? So that is basically the premise behind Future of Cities. We're launching an innovation hub in Miami during Art Basel. Stan is going to be a partner with us. We're doing the closing party for the Web3 Summit that's happening there, and there's going to be a lot of people gathering and descending in Miami. So really excited to have you guys here. Really excited for all the diverse speakers that came together fairly last minute. And really this is a forum of friends and allies who are working together towards solutions. And one of the things that has troubled me over the years is that particularly real estate has been a very vicious, good old boys club that's been very competitive. And I, as you know, I come from a different background. I don't come from real estate and I don't come from that world. And I'm a community builder. And so for me, I think the best solutions come from solutions that are co-designed and worked on together. And there's so many people that are working in silos. So what I'm really excited to start seeing now is that we're kind of getting past this point of competition and moving towards a more collaborative model. And so before we get started on our first panel, I think Boeri is going to be here. Do you know what time he's getting here? Stefano? He's here a few minutes because I think he's our first panel. But I've been searching high and low around the world for examples because people say to me, what does a city of the future look like? Show me a visual. Everybody wants an illustration. And it's kind of against the fundamental principles of regenerative placemaking to telegraph what their neighborhood should look like. But we can all get inspired by images, right? So for me, the city of the future for me, you know, that I was inspired as a kid was the Wizard of Oz and the Emerald City, right? It's green, it's beautiful, it's shiny, and you have this emerald trail that leads you to this magical world. And so, right? Exactly, and you have your metaverse Emerald City. And so all of that has been inspiration for me. And actually the first talk that I did around the future of cities was at Tech Open Air in Berlin in 2018. And we presented that. And so it's just a point of reference. And there are many incredible artists and architects and visionaries and artists who can do a much better job illustrating what the city of the future looks like. But the best people to do are the locals and the people who know their own community. Stefano, welcome. Come on in. Get a seat. There's some chairs over here if you guys want. Anybody who's outside, come on in. Still a few more seats. So many of us in this room are urban planners, artists, activists, storytellers, people involved in finance, people involved in different aspects of what we're co-creating and co-designing. Some technology, a number of blockchain people here, so really excited about kind of the new world of creating equity by leveraging solutions within Web3 and blockchain, which is what we're doing in our Phoenix Arts District project. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring to the stage Alex and Mikolai, who are coming to form a partnership with Future of Cities, and two inspirational gentlemen that are doing some incredible projects, and a prime example of people doing projects all over the world that want to come together and share best practices and learn from different groups around solutions and who are doing some incredible things. So, did you guys want to play some video, the video?
The video, your video or my video? No, you had a video, right?
Anyway, so that's for the next panel on regenerative placemaking. But you can stop it now because I want to give some context before playing it. So I would stop the video. Thank you. Yeah, and without the sound. So these two gentlemen that are sitting here, I've developed a really close relationship with over the last year. And I think we've inspired each other, which is kind of the idea behind what we're doing. We're all learning. We're all new to this. This is all a very nascent and new industry, really, that's being born, regenerative development. You know, so we were talking about sustainability for so long, and sustainability just isn't enough anymore, right? So the real concept of collaboration and working together and sharing best practices and not being, you know, holding things so close to the chest. And I think a lot of it has to do with the work that they've done spiritually and the work that they're doing on their own personal development. And you know, they were, my wife, Jimena, who's right there, who's my inspiration and you know, the person I love the most in the world. And we have a beautiful retreat center together in Florida called Chosen. And she was just in the Amazon for a month with Mikolai, and she was also in Sao Paulo with Alex. And, you know, it's just really incredible to see kind of the connection between the indigenous wisdom tradition and the indigenous culture that exists in these places, and that people are finally starting to listen to what they have to say and incorporate into this redesign, global redesign of our entire civilization, because they're stewarding 85% of all of our biodiversity. And I think that this is really important. I think what we're seeing, and Alex can talk about it more, and I'll turn it over to Alex first with his project in Sao Paulo, is Matarasa is a whole biophilic community and city inspired by the indigenous communities in Brazil and by biophilic design, but is really one of the first demonstration projects that I've seen that is really exemplifying some of these characteristics. And so today, on this special day, November 8th, which is actually an eclipse, it's a full moon, it's election day in the United States, it's COP27, it's this convergence of really powerful cosmic and human events happening at the same time. I don't think it's any coincidence that we're here and you guys are presenting your presentation on the Amazon as well, which you released for this COP27 conference. I think is really a testament to the coming together and collaboration between and among different parties. Carolina's telling me I have to speed up. So, okay. I can't hear you. Okay, cool, perfect. So we'll be quick. All right, so Alex, I'm gonna turn it over to you so you can quickly talk a little bit about your project, and then Nikolai will speak next.
So, thank you. What I wanted to say is, we're here also today, the three of us, because we're sealing our alliance, which is very important. You're going to talk about that just after, right? Yeah. Or okay, so the project of Matarazzo is, I hope, the first of many. It's been a very long journey of 12 years, and we decided to do it in São Paulo, which is the center of the most powerful green country in the world, and to help bring a new energy to that country to show that there's a path in regeneration rather than a path of the past, which was in extraction. So we developed this enormous place, which is meant to gather all kinds of people, but mostly 4 kinds of people. The leadership of Brazil, because you cannot change anything without changing the mind of the leadership, and that's actually the most complicated people in this planet right now. We have to change the way they think. The entrepreneurs who need to understand how they bring their companies to regeneration. It's nice to have wishful thinking, but you need money, you need plans, etc. And that's what we do through the AYA. The creative people, because they are the ones who will reinvent the world of tomorrow. They are the prophets, and we need to let them speak and interact with these 2 other groups, and the green citizens who have their own way of seeing the world and applying it. So we create this gigantic place, and to create this gigantic place, we took over a very old, abandoned place that no one wanted, and we wanted to show that the path to preservation was creating value, and we did it very successfully because the place is now open, and it has become the most valuable place in Brazil. But more importantly, we have developed a place where we still make it open to everybody. So we use technology to allow to give access to all the services that we create to everyone. And we also use the technology to include. So all the food, we have 34 restaurants, is supplied by small agriculture people that we finance, and we work with the best chefs. And the kiosks in the streets, you know, are people who were selling food in the street before, who now work with the best chefs of Brazil to sell their food. And we show how circular economy of this kind generates happiness for everyone. And voila, it's a gigantic machine. The good news is we're here together because we all inspire each other, and we'll take energies from each other. So Nicolaj is now going to explain his project. In our project, we also have art, we have longevity, which is the key to the passage of this new civilization. And we, the 3 of us, share, the same vision of the world, I think, with different target groups sometimes, in different kinds of projects. But the most important is making this happen is a real challenge, because there is no bankers in the planet who want to finance this kind of great ideas. So we need to prove our own models. We need to make them work. There is no technologies that have been, proved, in real life at scale, like what we do. We're dealing with thousands of people. And there is no real example of what we do. Like integrating nature into cities is challenging. And here we plant 10,000 trees.
Turn it over to collide because also Stefano needs to leave. So
Yes.
we'll do a brief introduction and then you
Yeah,
can introduce Stefano.
perfect. Thank you, Tony. So when I met Alex Alat the very first time, there was two things that happened many years ago. The first was we were finishing each other's sentences. And the second one was that everything what he laid out sounded totally crazy. And then I realized that I also must sound crazy to other people. Yeah? So those are kind of seldom moment of self-reflection. And then after our trip to the Yawanawa, to Acre in Brazil, with Ximena, Tony's wife, we came, Stefano, the first time to the project of Alex Alat to really see it and to really experience it. This most beautiful Rosewood Hotel by Jean Nouvel, completely covered by trees. The amazing, like basically underground world that he have created with the fully immersive ballroom and everything, and the ayahuasca bar, and everything became like all this, narratives that sounded like from a different planet, totally crazy, suddenly became reality. And this is a big round of applause for Alex because he is actually building dreams, yeah? And building dreams is exactly the moment when I want to introduce Stefano Boeri to the stage. Also with a big round of applause, please. Please come, yeah.
Good to see you.
My friend. And I want basically to use the time, thank you Stefano for coming. We are here, we were sitting yesterday at the Italian pavilion, invited by yourself. We were talking about our big topic. I give a short introduction to where it all comes from. So it was actually an exhibition in the Palazzo Strozzi with Carsten Höller.
Carsten, yeah.
Yes, and Stefano Mancuso, our great friend, that actually introduced me together with Hans-Ulrich Obrist to Stefano Boeri. And Stefano Mancuso is a plant biologist. And he did an exhibition with Carsten Höller, where Carsten Höller built like helix-formed slides. And Stefano Mancuso gave us a little army of baby bean plants. And now the experiment was you needed to slide down, holding this baby bee plant in your hand, and then Mancuso's neurobiology of plants, a discipline he created by himself, would examine the plant to see what was the feeling of the plant to the sliding process. And this all rewired your own perception. While you were sliding with this baby bee plant, you learned that these plants have actually feelings, they have emotions, they have a consciousness, and they react to, and then I read all the books of Stefano Mancuso, big bestsellers, and it's really, plants are, according to his books, much more intelligent than our race. At least they are, from an evolution perspective, much more successful because they exist already many 100 millions of years. And we just started and we are almost about to end ourselves. So probably we need to see it from this perspective. Now, Stefano Mancuso and Stefano Boeri, so basically co-created, and Stefano Boeri then took it into the, into the urban planning. And I consider this as important as the Bauhaus movement. Because the first time, so if you look back in history, and let me repeat this, what I'm always saying, because it's very, captivating. If you look at any settlement of humans that is 50,000 years old, 20,000 years old, 5,000 years old, or that is 2,000 years old like Pompeii, you will see that it was always the same. It was exchanging living nature through death matter. So Pompeii's layout, the city of Pompeii, covered 79 BC by the Vesuvius ashes and rediscovered in the 17th century, not 1 inch for a plant life. So it was all stone. This is how we formulated culture as an antithesis to nature. Culture was always against nature. And when you scale it up, it doesn't work because these cities have the microclimate that is reassembling the microclimate of a desert. Cities are desertification. So culture has this original sin to be directed against nature. And, you know, now we have the first time the example of the Bosco Verticale in Milan that was created by Stefano Boeri to contradict this. Actually, culture can be a part of nature. And I want to hear your thoughts on this and your thoughts on the future and how to overcome the past that is basically destroying our future.
Thanks, Nicola. I totally agree. So, honestly, it's quite complicated to, let's say, to describe the inspiration of what you have done. It's more about obsession. I think I believe we have all to cultivate our obsession, and I always had this obsession for trees. And at a certain moment, we started to see how it's possible to imagine that trees could be, let's say, treated as tenants of a building. So, and then, well, there are main inspiration from Frederick to Vassar to Joseph Beuys to Italo Calvino that were talking about how we can imagine a world where trees are the protagonists of life, together with humans. And so the first prototype we developed was you are right, it was in Milano. Basically, it works well. There are 2 towers with 21,000 plants and hundreds of trees. And 20 species of birds and 360 humans. And this is a serious ecosystem that works together. It's amazing how after 9 years, because it were 9 years, and the first plants were moved from the botanic nursery to the construction site 11 years ago. So now it's quite a long period, and we have, let's say, done our best to observe, to monitorize what is happening. So in terms of capacity of trees to, let's say, not be only a decoration, not be only an ornamental presence, but become a component of our way of living or of our idea of architecture, and how they absorb CO2, how they produce oxygen, how they absorb the dust of the pollution, how they implement biodiversity of living species, how they shadow the facade. Is about 30-35 degrees of difference in summertime. So you can imagine how much they contribute to reduce the consumption, the cost of consumption or energy consumption for conditions here in summertime. So that's one. The first, when we went ahead, we tried to do other experiment, and I think the one that we are developing together in Dubai, for me, it's really a formidable step forward. But just to give you some clue, in Eindhoven we have built a social housing vertical forest. That's so important for us because we have demonstrated it's possible to do the same building, the same green architecture, affordable for everybody. In Hangguang we have done the same in China. We are building now using wood and timber because we know that that's such a very important way to cut the production of CO2 in the construction process. And now for Dubai, I think that it's amazing what we will do together about parental water management, because it's the real challenge in this kind of climate condition is that one. And climate conditions are the beginning of everything. And I think it's so interesting to think to climate condition as a way to overcome this dualism between human sphere and nature, between culture and nature, between urban sphere and nature. So we know what's happened in our bodies with COVID-19. We know how a natural microorganism has changed the life of millions of people everywhere on the planet. And if you think to climate, condition, we understand that we are part of the same sphere. No? And so we start observing climate conditions, then we start with the second step is about selection of plants. The first step is finding a way to make every plant in condition to grow and to live in the best way. So we study the proportion of the plants, the evolution trajectory, and then we start to design our architecture. That's what we do, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. I think COP27 it's in any case an important moment to be here. Thank you again.
Stefan, yeah, please.
Because it's a place for urban agriculture, for hydroponic agriculture. We've introduced, let's say, hundreds of square meters of let's say, a place for cultivation, and this is very important.
Thank you very much. Okay, one more follow-up question, or are we out of time?
Let me see if maybe we'll bring it out to the audience.
Okay.
Emily.
Can you tell me about the root systems of the trees and the plants that you're putting into your buildings? Because root systems are a key part of how ecosystems grow and form together. Thus, if you put plants in a concrete box, it will only grow to the capacity of the root depth. And to me, this building is very beautiful aesthetically, and the idea of putting trees on balconies for people in high rises to see and benefit from the oxygen is just a form of dominance, of human dominance over nature. How can we grow trees, transplant them into buildings that are already causing deforestation of land to create the buildings, and then put those trees for our use? Like, can you tell me about how the root systems work, how much these trees have the capacity to grow before they have to be taken out? Because eventually they will grow to a point of no expansion, and they will have to be taken out, which will, again, then create more waste and create another cycle.
No, I think it's very simple. So we work with a team of botanists from the beginning, and so basically we study how roots could, let's say, extend their nets in a let's say fixed in a box with a pot with a fixed dimension. And there are many technologies that help this to happen. Then we know well that the proportion of roots are related to the proportion of branches. So that's why we more or less know how much trees could grow. And well, if I have to, let's say, to use the Milan prototype as a case study, well, it's fantastic. We had maybe something like 15, 20 trees that died in these 10 years with nothing. So, but with 21,000 plants, it's an amazing success. And then there are other things that we are studying, and together with Stefano Mancuso, we are studying how trees are communicating themselves. So it's something which is absolutely miraculous, is that you can see how plants are growing at different layers, because you will see the vertical flora, you will see as there are, let's say, trunk that be started 4 or 5 meter below you, and then you have the leaves 12 meter or 15 meter, and the branch and the leaves never touch the branch of the other tree. So they arrive to be very closer, but they don't touch. So it's not only thanks to the root communication. There is something of different that Stefan is studying, and it's a miracle, but it's amazing. But well, we know that trees are growing between rocks, no, and on slopes of mountains. So we know well how they are extremely capable to adapt themselves of very hard kind of condition and very hard orographical condition.
I was going to say it would be nice to make a material like concrete that could have roots grow between. So these buildings can become structures of the trees themselves, and some sort of biomaterial.
I believe that the future of the building is to become a vertical jungle. That's it. Why not? No?
I would
Instead of having a ruin, we will have the vertical jungles. It's so good.
I would like to answer the second part of the question that wasn't answered, but I think it's very important. It's a very important question. The question was, how are we actually coping with the reality that the building has an impact over its life cycle that basically transformed probably thousands of hectares of forest or nature or ecosystem into the building, yeah, created the Anthropocenic mass, you know, that in the year 2020 exceeded all the biomass on the planet. Our biggest single problem, if you would want to, you know, summarize all our environmental issues with one proportion, it would be the proportion of all biomass that is 85% plant-based, photosynthesis organism, and Anthropocenic human-created mass that is closing the soil, that is basically pushing, you know, transforming basically life into death. This is what we are doing with our cultural production. And obviously the facade of the building is not enough to compensate for this, not even a little bit. So what we did, and this is important to say, that our impact investment initiative created an investment policy that is based on a positive environmental impact in building and infrastructure. And how can we, this was actually yesterday also the question during our talk in the Italian pavilion, how can we make sure that it is compensated with, from the perspective of a building? The only way to do it, so we did together the calculations how much a facade is compensating for the life cycle impact. For the carbon impact, it's 5% only, right? So the facade, but still 5% is not bad, right? So 5% is already a number that is more than nothing. But then there's still 95% carbon emissions, and there's a lot of other life cycle basically impact. The only way to do this is to see a combined vision between urban and regional development. So we did actually a policy proposal based on which now our investment policy is based, that we need to restore as much ecosystem, as much the building was impacting the environment. So we need to actually, with the afforestation of an original forest based on microbiome restoration in the soil, create as much afforestation as necessary to compensate the building. And what we proposed is that that could be implemented on a level of a building code, right? So that's, but it's necessary. So the building alone will not save us, obviously. Yeah. But good, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Welcome in Milano and meet soon.
Thank you, Stefano. See you in Miami. So I'm going to switch up the panels. You want to do a picture? For sure, absolutely. So we're going to switch it up now because we're missing some people from the next panel. Thank you, Stefano. That was really inspiring. And thank you for leading the charge in biophilic design. And you have to be brave to be able to do stuff like this because it's not the most financially easy path to take. There aren't banks, there aren't a lot of investors to do that, and we have to rapidly prototype the future. So, and we got to keep on pushing the envelope because we do need to rewild our cities. We need to rewild our hearts and minds as well. So I think that's part of the process. So thank you. Thank you for being an innovator and a visionary. Appreciate you. So I think what I'd like to do is call up the social activism panel now. You guys want to go now? Are you ready? Is everybody here? Hi.
Hey.
How are you? Great. Good timing.
Alice.
Yeah. Hi. Who are you waiting? Are you waiting for
Hi.
Lucy?
We were waiting for our moderator Lucy, and I don't think she's here yet.
Okay.
No, Lucy Martins.
Tony. What is with our partnership announcement and all this?
Yes.
I don't need
That's,
this
we can
anymore.
do that now. We can do that now since
As
we're
long
all
as-
here.
Exactly, we are already here on the stage, right?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. We'll do it at the end. Yeah, I'd rather do it at the end. So, we'll put, yes.
We cannot do this partnership with
No.
Roxana.
Yeah.
We have to rebalance this.
Yeah, but we can have Ximena, Patricia, and Roxana co-announcing this partnership.
But I think we can do it at the end. We'll do it at the end.
At the end.
Yeah. Hey, how are you? Carolina. Which panel should we do next? Maybe the net zero panel, because I don't think Mikel's not here from the regenerative placemaking panel. He is? He's arriving? All right, and regenerative placemaking, you're up. The next one will be on regenerative development, and Rosenberg is going to be moderating, and she'll invite the speakers to come up. Alex, I think you're still on this one.
turning into an interview.
Okay, Tony just told me we need to be on time. Sit down. Okay, good. So I have the pleasure to moderate this session here, and we already had a really good start about the whole regenerative placemaking in action. So this panel here is not just about we wish, we want, we have probably done something. This panel here is about exactly what they have done and how we can scale it. And what Tony and I just were speaking about, when you build something, you need to make sure it is scalable, affordable, and accessible, not just for some countries, but for all countries around the world. So together with me, we have, of course, the Tony. I don't need to introduce him. He already is known by everybody. Then I do have a Dane up here, very proud, Michael Bülow, who is the founder and chairman of NREP, a very proud Dane, very proud of that company, but it's going to change the world, not just Denmark, but around the world, that's for sure. Just to set some expectations. Then we have Roxanne for Impact One, which is also a dear friend of me, and of course Tony. And then we have Ben Deer, I probably said that wrong, CEO.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you so much. Alex, who was already up here, and he's on the panel still.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So what I promised, he gave me 3 questions, and he was stressing me a little bit to make sure that they really speak about action-oriented things. But what is important here is that Tony, as mentioned in the beginning, have created a framework, and then you say borrowing frameworks, but framework is not borrowing because framework is about identifying a way to do things in a certain way so you can scale it and get others who haven't really figuring out yet to apply that. And as you know, the people in this room here and on the panel here, they are definitely the movers and the shakers. So getting people like them to really define frameworks that can be used by others is what we need. So what I want to know from each of you is what specific solutions have you created and implemented, not just a wishful thinking, and who would like to start?
Oh boy. Hey. Well, I didn't see that one coming. I was like, I'm gonna skip the first and second and third seat, you know, to be in the right side, but I'm happy to start.
And please introduce
Yes, I will.
your company.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Vidya Risk. I'm a CEO of small, medium-sized company called Paragon Developments. And I'm very happy to share with you what we're trying to do here. But I want to start with, like, since I was born, I was always told, you know, like, you need to work a little harder so that you enjoy your life. You know, like, you need to work a little harder to enjoy life. And
Smarter.
yeah, it's fucking crazy. And I've been trying to do that, right? Like, I've been trying to work harder. But then I realized, you know, like, it doesn't get enough. And I thought that maybe you should read it the other way around. And you say, hey, how about we, you know, like, be in a happy place, or a place making of happiness, and then you will be able to work harder. So we're trying to do that. So we're trying to empower people to achieve advancement through our sustainable and intelligent office building. So we started with the office space, since in Egypt it's also like rather a new area where everybody has been focusing on living. And we have a philosophy to do this that empowers people with social inequality, or at least trying to promote, you know, like, more inclusion into the buildings that we develop, and also have a very communal mindset into it. And I'm gonna explain it in a second. So first we have a philosophy, and then second we do have a product that we try to build, and then third one is the communal area. And philosophy is really about a space that empowers rather than anything else. So we don't think of ourselves as a real estate company at all. Pretty much like, I think, Future of Cities, where they don't consider themselves as a real estate company. And the philosophy is that individual and sum, and how the sum of those individual needs, you could place a space for them, and that space becomes, you know, their empowerment. And I'm gonna explain it in a second. Am I taking too long? Am I taking too long? Okay, we're in the clock. So this is on the philosophy side. On the product, we do a fractional ownership model. So we have like really small size offices, and that helps more people to be in. But we also have like a large office spaces, and we combine them through the communal area. And we do this through, in the design phase, we work a lot on the efficiency, and then we take the efficiency that we did. So in terms of, and it's probably a different model than in the US, the offices we sell has a 30% loading ratio, and that means that the net area is only 70% of what we sell. And those 30%, whatever we optimize, we put it in a hub that empowers people to do better. So we take all the utilities outside the building, and the buildings are huge, 40,000 square meter. We take that 30% and we provide it as a communal space.
Okay. Thank you so
Thank you very much.
So now, Mikkel, I want to hear from you. Mick, I want to hear from you. I know you guys have done really well in Denmark. I know you're on your way into the United States. Talk about what you're doing and how you're bringing that to the world.
Sure, thanks so much. So, you know, I'm an entrepreneur, and I have always had this belief that business is about solving problems. And not just because it's a nice thing to do, but because it is also a superior business model. And I think that the philosophy, that's the philosophy that's been driving us always. I think the however dramatic and how obviously urgent the climate crisis is, there is a gift in any crisis. And I think the climate crisis gift is this realization that the current system does not work. So the climate crisis is a symptom of a system that doesn't work. And the simplicity of the system doesn't work is just that too many corporates and too many politicians have, instead of focusing on solving problems, been focusing on a more short-term metric of either making money or of getting votes. And therefore we need to get these systems back in focusing on solving problems. And then you'll be rewarded. When you solve a problem, you know, it will make a commercial success. And that's sort of the philosophy that's always been driving what we do. What we're trying to do is, in the end, make better cities. So I think the biggest, you know, unmet demand in the world is livable, sustainable, inclusive cities. And we've really been starting sort of in a very, very small place of just doing individual properties. And then we've slowly been progressing to continue build more and more skills to be able to build cities that actually, you know, serve the users of the cities rather than the owners of the assets. Because when you look at real estate, most assets are not created for the users, but created for a pension fund, you could say, as an asset. And that removes the whole focus on it as a product, which has utility and value for everybody that uses it. And that's what we try to do. Now, we are not a climate company, but we do believe the biggest problem facing cities right now is the climate, and therefore that's our number one priority. So we launched, a few years ago, we found a pathway to how we can be completely net zero in 2028, which I don't understand. Right now they're not anybody else who's trying to do that. And I think what we've learned is that the solutions are actually there. It's a bit more about creating the incentive structures to making it actually happen. We're just right now we're creating the first sort of net zero building, including embodied carbon. So we're basically using biogenic materials instead of using normal virgin materials. And I think I can also talk for ages with this because I'm very passionate about it. But what we're really trying to do is we're really trying to collect and get together capital that shares our belief that in the end it's about solving problems, thereby creating demand through the value chain of doing this in a new way, while we're also investing in a lot of new innovations. So we have a climate tech company called 2150, Christian is here, where we then also identify a lot of new technology solutions that fundamentally can help us make this change.
Okay, Game On 2028 by a Danish company. Okay, Alex, what is the roadblocks? How can we scale this out? What is stopping us for doing this?
So what we develop here, what we develop with our solution is we believe that the fact that 80% of the carbon emission of the planet come from cities, which is only 1.7% of the area of the globe, allows us to find a solution which is working directly with the individual. Instead of working with the organizations, the governments, the cities, you can change things by allowing each individual to master their carbon emissions. And this is what we're trying to do. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to work on the 20% of the people inside these cities that generate more than 50% of the carbon emissions. These 20% are not so many people at the end of the day. And these people, they are the people, because of their level of income, etc., they are the people who generate the biggest amount of carbon for the planet. Each of these people, if they could master how they eat, how they dress, how they buy their electricity for their home, you can reduce their carbon impact within 28 months. Like get to the target of the Climate Accord of Paris. So what we do is we create with Mata these giant places like you've seen in the movie before, and we plan to attract about 20 million people, and these people then download an app, they become part of our community, and with that community they have some indexes. And the two key indexes is the carbon generation. They measure their carbon generation, and we show them how they can reduce that carbon generation with very, very easy steps. The problem is you individually today you can't, but if we supply you the solutions ready-made, you will, because everybody wants to be green. The second is the inclusion index. You can buy products that have a high inclusion factor, or you can buy products that have a zero inclusion factor. And by just knowing these metrics, you will learn, in your brain will change completely. You will learn how, by buying this, you include more people. And the last part, which is not self-generated and measured by third parties, it's measured by you instead of having the like of Instagram, the like of Facebook, or the heart of Instagram. We measure gratitude. People say their gratitude, so they recognize the product. I mean, we're making this test live next year. It's a huge development. We plan to have about 2 million people active on our system within 3 years, which is 10% of the city of São Paulo. And we believe that if this works, we can go to another 50 cities around the world and change, dramatically the impact of the carbon in dealing with that special tranche of the population.
So what I hear across all of you is that it's a much more holistic approach than we ever had before. So Roxanne, we talk about public-private partnerships. We talk about we need to put competition behind us, even though we still need to make sure we earn money. So how do we ensure going forward that what is being discussed here actually become a reality, not just in some countries or in some cities, but it's actually become something that C40 Resilient City Network really can scale out to any city in the world? What can we do around this?
Policy and also directing private capital towards it. So delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Roxana. I'm a chairwoman of Impact One. And I've spent my whole career, professional career, as a banker, financier. I've actually started off at EBRD, which is European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And really that was over 24 years ago. And at that time, all the commercial banks, including Goldman Sachs that my boyfriend was working for, were pretty much looking down a bit at EBRD because like you are guys stuck between a commercial bank and a development bank, so who are you? You know, we know fast forward now all the commercial institutions actually have to adapt this model because we cannot just continue with the greed that was before. Now I've been fascinated. I actually had a passion for sustainability, for environment, very early on from my parents who were teaching us as children how important it is and the gratefulness and for respect for the environment. So really that starts very early on. I did move on after to commercial banks, many of them, and wanted to see the pure greed commercial side. It was a very exciting experience, but now going back, my last job was actually, I was deputy CEO of the biggest Polish bank, and that was the time for me to step down and truly use all my different passions and the big passion for impact as well, and to put into a portfolio life that I call right now. So even though I was a banker, I was still an artist on the side and a movie producer. Now I feel I have the opportunity to fuse it all together and find the solutions. And the boring stuff, as you said, the policy change, that's very important, but there's not one solution. And I think we've seen the issue of the greenwashing, and now this is really the ESG, or the way to shift money towards the projects, the visionary projects that people are working on. We've just heard, actually, I have the opportunity to visit the project in São Paulo. It is truly mind-blowing. And it is the reality, it exists. So hence, with Impact One, we are redefining and creating new asset class, well-being infrastructure. And the reason for that, even for the big institutions, it just didn't exist, this asset class. So they didn't understand which bucket, so the billions of money that they have, they are not able to necessarily direct them because there's a change of redefinition and looking at the full cycle of the project.
Thank you so much. So as the final word from each of you, you have decided to come to CUP, of course, because you were invited by Tony, but also because you come here not empty-handed, right? So I would like to hear a few words from each of you. What have you committed? What is your big commitment that you're bringing here to CUP, that you are bringing to the world, and of course that you'll be fulfilling? So Tony, what is your big commitment that you're bringing to CUP here in COP27, follow up of COP26 in Glasgow?
My commitment is to each of you to serve in the best capacity that I can, to continue to convene the best and brightest thinkers and to be inclusive and diverse and to get all the perspectives out there, because I see so many brilliant solutions just on the stage right now, and I still see people working in silos. And so every time I'm about to start a new project or a new initiative, I always ask myself, is there somebody out there doing it better? Is there somebody I can partner with and collaborate, not to waste energy and resources? Because I think we have to get past the ego of wanting to be the solutionist ourselves and really just being part of the solution of who is doing it better. So I think sharing information, these partnerships are really important. Incentivizing and gamifying impact is something that we need to work on together. The technology you're developing, Alex, Mikolai, the stuff that you're working and the stuff that's happening around the world, we need to stop duplicating efforts and combining resources. And I think that's really what my mantra is. I'm going to keep on saying to people, we're launching an investment fund that's focused on the built environment as well. You already have a lot of that done, all the impact metrics, the ESG outcomes, and all of those things. Why replicate this and really combine resources? So my commitment is continue to listen and continue to convene as many bright minds out there so that we can rapidly prototype the future together. And I believe in this abundance mentality and consciousness. The world economy is $90 trillion today. In 30 years, it's going to be $900 trillion, mainly because of the digital economy. So there is enough resources and money to go around. It's just not properly distributed equally around the world. And so we have all the solutions. We just need to redirect those energy and resources and stop duplicating efforts.
Woo! Okay. You next.
I mean, building on that, so my commitment, our commitment is to continue investing in trying new solutions and then bringing all those learnings into ecosystems so we can create tipping points. So I believe a lot, unfortunately, but I think, the way you really change the world is if you got all of the pension funds and institutions in the world to start measuring differently tomorrow, everybody would act differently tomorrow. I mean, in matter of fact, that is how, unfortunately, the democracy works in reality on a global scale. So I think it's about making them realize that this is good for them. And so what we are trying to do is we are trying to lead by example to show, listen up, we can both generate returns to them and solve problems in the world. And then try to get many of them to rally around the solutions so we can create the tipping points so that this very complicated value chain that the urban environment is starts basically all following that and do not all try to invent the deep plate. That is in the end, I think, what we are trying to commit to.
What can I read in the Danish newspapers this week about you? Is there a press release going out? Is there something coming out from the company?
That tour knows.
Tour. What is your big commitment?
If it's of service, it will. You just let me know.
Very good. I think I sit in a different place where our biggest, because my team is here, so our biggest commitment is how could we transfer whatever is inspiring us in an environment where it's not utilized for that direction, right? So I think Egypt is a little bit far behind where we're trying to catch up on sustainability, let alone, net zero and regenerative, right? So we're still early on in our value chain. So how do we bring in, newest model? Can we skip a step on the way and not have to go through, where other countries have been 20 years ago and thinking about sustainability? And the other commitment is obviously not to be sitting on a high chair, well, you get the joke, but I really mean it, right? Because it's so easy to get on a high chair and say, well, you guys are doing it wrong. So how could you actually bring this inspiration with an open heart and listening, getting the right feedback? That's it.
Thank you so much.
So to me, it's about action, and I very much want to voice just what Tony said as well. The solutions are out there, the technology, even the intentions of people. We see here so many pure souls who truly have a passion. They're not. So I think it's really about being open and actually finding these new collaborations, because then we can definitely scale it faster.
Yeah, thank you. I just, to me, the commitment is simple. It continue building this constellation. As we meet each other in the different places together, we get closer and we make it stronger, by being together, and we're making it happen, But the most important for me is to support my dear partner here, Patricia, who has been giving the past few months every weekend with a fantastic team, because we are launching a report which I think will make history. That report is the mere reason why I first came to Brazil, to make this incredible green behemoth conscious of its superpowers, so that it can participate to save humanity before it's too late. Voilà.
Thank you so much. And I think that's conclude the panel. Will you say a closing word on it?
I think that's it.
That's it?
I would
That's
like
it?
to invite Jurgis, our regenerative storyteller musician, to the stage to transition to the next panel.
Can we get a photo?
Yeah, of course. Let's do a photo.
Beautiful human beings, how are you doing? If you are alive and well, can I get an expression of joy from you? What joyous humans sound like? No. Give me a sound of joy. Because feeling is contagious, enduring 3 hours of panels, no matter how interesting they are, can be a bit extreme. So I have been asked to bring a little bit of energy to the space. That's easy, cause that energy is within you. And when there's deep resonance, all you have to do is bring out the trust between all of us. Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, can we tap into the emotion that has brought us here to Sharm el Sheikh, to this room? Can you express it as a proper tribal? And know that as the air flows through your vocal cords, you are partaking in an alchemical process through which you turn air into sound that strokes the ears of everyone in this space. Take a deep breath in and hold it. Fill it with all your good juju, all your good vibes, and exhale.
What an introduction.
Yeah. Hello, hello. Oh, we're on. So, we are on. Thank you, Jurgis, for the amazing music.
Thank you.
So here we are, a group of amazing women, and it happens that we all know each other, which is very, very nice. So I hope it's going to be nice and easy to have this panel and have a conversation about film, music, art, guerrilla stage, and trying to get, the messages out about what we can do with communication, how can we have a silent revolution, a peaceful revolution. Are we even in a revolution? Do we want a revolution? So, I'm going to start this
Just
conversation.
some easy, modest questions, though. Wow.
Exactly. Easy. So, Alice, I'll start with you. Could you explain a little bit with your work with Earthrise, how you're trying to get your stories out and how you're trying to break the barriers of what the media is telling us? What is the truth right now? What is the alternate truth that you are telling with your films?
Or trying to tell. Hi, everyone. So nice to be here. My name's Alice. And yeah, a bit of background to contextualize. Earthrise is 2 years old, but really a long journey of many years led me there. I grew up always very, very passionate about storytelling, the power of the image, the power of storytelling to move hearts and minds, to build empathy. For me, it was like the most powerful weapon in our arsenal, this tool for empathy. I grew up wanting to be a photojournalist, and that's always how I saw things. I went to university to study politics, and right when I graduated, it was 2015, it was the height of the refugee crisis in Europe. And through my passion for photojournalism, I turned my eyes to this extraordinary emergency on our doorstep that I'd done absolutely nothing about. And it was a story I started to document in Calais, then in Greece, then in Serbia, then in Iraq, then in Lebanon, the Syrian crisis. At this point, was never thinking about climate change. had never grown up thinking about the issue. It felt to me in a very sort of abstract, and I think looking back, naively, of course, I saw it as a nature problem, an environmental problem. And I didn't know or understand then how it was deeply interlinked with human rights and social justice. And my work in forced migration was a story I would focus on for 4 or 5 years. It was a penny drop moment when I realized, right, climate is going to exacerbate everything that I care about, every social justice issue that we care about, racial injustice, forced migration, women's rights. And since I made that connection way too late, I have put all my effort into documenting the issues, but telling the human story. And for me, that is the great untold story, is the voice and the stories of people living on climate front lines. Most recently, for the past 2 years, that's been indigenous communities, particularly across Brazil. But I know it's something we all feel extremely passionate about, is uplifting and amplifying voices that have historically been totally marginalized from the spaces that we are right now in, that celebrate them in a way that is incredibly recent. It's an incredible progression, but it is too recent. I've taken way too long, so I'm going to pass it on, but I do think the other thing is hope. And maybe I'll come on to that later.
Beautiful, thank you. Yeah, and the question is the human story actually heard enough? So, yeah, I would like to pass on to you, Nat, and the work you're doing and the stories you're telling beyond the human story.
Thank you so much for this question. Thank you, Future of Cities, and Tony and Jimena for having me. My name is Natalie Kelly Ia Malki. My grandmother is Quechua from Peru. We are the descendants of the Incas. And before I get to your question, I've been hearing a lot about real estate and development, and just want to remind people that indigenous people have a history of incredible development that doesn't involve using up all of our resources, that through our development we have actually built biodiversity. My ancestors, the Incas, were incredible agriculturalists. They built cities and designed cities with agriculture and the building of biodiversity in mind. The people of the Amazon created the Amazon. And so while we're here clapping our hands at a building with trees on it, which is wonderful, let's hear a round of applause for the Amazon rainforest that was built by indigenous humans. And they did that, coming back to your question, because they understood that humans are not the main story. We are one thread in an intricate and interwoven web of life. And they understood that their rightful place in the ecosystem was to be of service to that web of life. And they figured out how to do that. And that's why it is so important to center their stories, center their wisdom, because they have spent millennia listening to the natural world, understanding how to come in and develop with the natural world, understanding that the needs of the spiders, the needs of the trees, the needs of the rivers and the mountains are just as important as our needs. And so as a storyteller, I do work with the Fungi Foundation, talk about unsung heroes, invisible heroes, mycelium. Let's just clap again for the mycelium network and everything that fungi does for us. So I spend my life trying to center the non-human heroes of our ecosystem. And I think that's so important as we talk about GDP and net zero. It's like, okay, but who here is talking about the pollinators? Who here is talking about the fungi? Who is talking about the phytoplankton? Oceanic Global is on Friday if anyone wants to come. But we have to decentralize ourselves as humans. We're not that important. In fact, everything else could survive without us. But we couldn't survive without everything else, without all the other species, except, and this is just one thing I want to end on here, in the case of indigenous people of Central and South America, it's actually proven that a lot of the biodiversity in the Amazon, in the forests of Mesoamerica, would not exist without humans. So actually, here's another way to reframe our human participation in this web of life. That actually, as of now, we are all here, unless any of you are in agroforestry. Well, Keith is. So Keith, okay, Stephen put his hand up. But we are all pretty much degenerative humans. We're taking resources more than we're giving back. But what if there was a new narrative to tell? And this is what I want to focus on with the indigenous cosmovision as being part of something bigger than oneself. Well, most of these forests in Mesoamerica and South America wouldn't be so abundant and biodiverse without human intervention. And so it's these kind of narratives that I'm trying to tell as a storyteller, that I use my platform as an actress and an environmentalist to put forward, that we don't have to be degenerative. We actually, our birthright, as humans, what we are here to do is be a part of the ecosystem in a way that is beneficial and harmonious, leaving this world better than when we found it.
Thank you, Nat. Very powerful and important messages. Yeah, it's so important to look at the things that are unseen, because I think the world we're living in, it's all about the seen world, especially here at COP. So I think if we can go into the healing and the sounds and the things that we actually don't see, how can they bring on a revolution or movement? So I'd like to go to you, Sophie, as you work a lot with music and you create movements and bring people together. So what's your silent revolution?
It begins with a dream, doesn't it? Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Sophie. Lovely to see you all today. I have worked in politics and policy for the past 15 years, and in seeing what is happening within politics, I've noticed that there's a profound need for something that's core to us all, and that's culture. Last year's COP was quite exemplary of that. You know, we were, all of us, as many of us in the Blue Zone, if you were there, and it's stale, there's not a lot going on, or there's a lot, but it's a lot of politics and people fighting and shouting and not getting us where we really need to get to in this moment of time. And what we found outside of the Blue Zone were these communities upon communities of cultural actors coming together in ceremony, in water ceremony, in music ceremony, in dance ceremony, in art, and it made us feel alive, and it made us feel together, and it brought us together as a community. And even coming in and hearing that song and everybody breathing and it bringing us into being kind of this one beating heart or this one unit, the vibration of music, it's so powerful. And so what we're trying to do right now with all of you as a community is come together and say, we are all part of this world, we are all culture, and we need to be coming together through joy, through catharsis, through celebration. And as Alice said, we need some hope right now. We are all so scared of what's happening to the world. We are all so furious with what's happening to the world. We are going to bed feeling depressed. We're going to bed learning about the next thing that's becoming extinct. And actually there is this huge opportunity that we have in front of us to make change. And that's about relating. That's about how we all relate with each other, with ourselves, and with the world. And that's why community and truth and joy and music and art and culture is so important. And respecting the heritage of the many different cultures that exist in this world is where we need to be going and getting to and putting at the forefront of conversation. So if there's any story to tell, it's that. Yeah.
Thank you, Sophie. Amazing. Yeah, very important. And Emily, how are you trying to infiltrate with your work?
Hi guys, my name is Emily Collins, and I'm a co-founder of Rave Revolution. We mobilize people to come to the streets in guerrilla-style protests using music and art and dance to basically transcend barriers and put demand letters in front of people making decisions. Our goal is really to bridge the gap between activism and the environmental movement and the working class. As the working class, the environmental movement and activists, we are seen as being a very privileged group of people who have the ability to block roads and skip work and do things that the working class has always been opposed to, because the mass media and propaganda has pitted us against each other. Knowing that if the working class and majority of people come to the environmental movement, we can actually make a change. Thus, we need to bridge that gap. We are trying to bridge that gap to create a middle ground to show people that we can come together to demand change, because environmental justice is social justice. How can we bring the labor movements into the environmental movement? Because we need them. The only way we're going to create policy change is through people power. When we go into the street and we demand action, there's multiple people and corporations on the other side of that action also putting a demand there, and behind that demand is opposite of our demand, is a lot of money and is a lot of lobbying. And we need to remember that we're being met on the same side of what we're trying to create with something completely different, which is infinite growth, which is extraction of material resources, human dominance, you name it, there's many factors there. And we need to bridge that gap between how the environmental movement is seen in mainstream media and what we're doing, and that we are the same thing. We are social justice. Environmental justice is social justice. We're doing this for people like my mother, who was a single mom working 3 jobs to raise her children. She couldn't go to the street and protest for climate change on a work day because she was going to lose her livelihood and not be able to feed her children. We need to bridge the gap of what we're creating now and bring these people into the movement that we have. And that's what my organization is trying to do through art and music and activism and labor union linkage and working class, creating a working class structure within the revolution.
Thank you so much for your work, Emily. Amazing. Yeah, and going on, how can we actually hear the voices of those who don't have connection to the internet and don't have connection to, social media, who are like the hidden voices? Maybe you, Alice, can talk more about that, because you spent a lot of time in indigenous communities, for example, or refugee camps. How can we push that message forward?
Well, I think the first thing is to dispel this sort of old trope that I grew up with from the journalist that I so admired, which was the idea of giving a voice to the voiceless. I really hate that, because everyone has a voice. I think we can help to amplify people's voices, and of course social media is an incredible tool to do that. I think that we have slowly but surely, thank God, crept our way out of a period of denial, but we have just as quickly, I think, found ourselves in a period of climate despair. And so for me, every single day, I'm trying to work out how to tell stories that inspire hope and optimism, that do not shy away or deny the grave, grave, grave reality that we're in, but that harness creativity, harness the power of design, to show us that another world is possible, that another future is possible. And I'm so passionate about leveraging storytelling and creativity, because we need to paint a vision of the world that we want to go towards. I think we're having a collective identity crisis where we don't know quite what that world is, where to go, which way's up, which way's down. I think we are lost. Part of that is telling those human stories and sharing a platform, uplifting the voice of people who have solutions that we don't have, who have value systems that we have for so long ignored, and that now we're desperately clutching at, because we're like, oh, that actually maybe we should have listened all that time. So I think it's really, we need to tell those stories. It's something that I'm absolutely dedicated to, and with Earthrise, that is really the reason for being. You know, for 2 years, we've been every single day sharing incredibly complex information, breaking it down, making it more accessible. I guess the raising awareness and education piece is really at the foundation of what we do. We use good design as kind of, we call it stealth or ninja activism. You know, can we make something that people don't feel immediately patronized by or immediately preached to, but that informs them and makes something feel more understandable? It's funny, I feel every time that we make a film or we make a series or I'm up on stage talking about this issue, we dance a dance of walking on eggshells. We're like, okay, how do I tell stories about climate change that make people feel informed, as I said, but not patronized or preached to, that you feel like you're educating but not patronizing, that you hopefully inject some humor or some lightness, but do justice to how complicated it is. It is fucking hard telling stories about climate change. You are weaving between all of these deep, complex emotions that people are navigating: terror, fear, denial, or just wanting to bury our heads in the sand, turn a blind eye. And that is what I hope that storytelling can do, is not only be that tool and weapon for empathy, but can also drag people out of that state of paralysis. Because if we have so many people thinking, well, we're fucked anyway, what can we do about it? We're in really, really dangerous territory.
Yeah, Nat, I want to also continue with your conversation and listening more to the indigenous voices and how they relate to climate change. Is it just climate change, or is it actually a much bigger thing that's not working right now?
Capitalism. Hello, is this on now? Okay. Well, Alice touched on this, like these are stories that we're waking up to, like, oh my goodness, maybe we should have listened. Maybe we shouldn't have called their value systems and their technologies primitive. And now there's this rush to, oh, we need an indigenous person for the panel, or we need to diversify. And it's like, okay, but what about actual meaningful relationships, meaningful solidarity with indigenous people? I heard Tony Cho mention resource distribution. Why are indigenous people living in some of the most abundant, biodiverse places in the world, yet facing the highest rates of childhood hunger? In some parts of the Amazon, that's what's going on. So the resources, they have to sell their ancestral home to extractive industries, but they're not receiving any of these resources in return. And so the point I'm trying to make is that it's wonderful to be inviting indigenous people onto panels. It's wonderful now that we're looking towards their technologies and their wisdom traditions, but we have to be meaningfully applying this to policy. We have to be meaningfully showing up as allies. It can't just be tokenism. And also understanding that there's so much more to learn. If we keep approaching it from this extractive mindset, what can we get from them? What can we get technology? We're missing the point. And that point is that this is about relationship. They're here to teach us a relationship to the web of life that we haven't yet figured out, because we still think that everything else has been put here to serve us humans. And so when we can stop and slow down and not make this about the bottom line, and not make this about using the word regeneration to serve our capitalist model, our capitalist systems, but to really think about the relationship behind what regeneration means. A relationship rooted in regeneration is a relationship rooted in reciprocity. And that's something that I will spend my life learning about from my ancestors, the Incas. We have a word called Aini. Aini means today for you, tomorrow for me. That implies giving comes before receiving. That is completely opposite to trickle-down economics. And just, I'll get as rich as possible, and then some will trickle down to you sometime in the future. No, this is relationships rooted in deep respect for other living beings, putting them first and reorienting ourselves towards reciprocity, towards being the embodiment of reciprocity with all other living beings.
Thank you. Yes, reciprocity is something I wanted to mention as well, and how can we keep this cycle going? So when you talk to indigenous people and when you talk to them about COP, they just said it's very simple. You just go, give your offerings to the water, give your offerings to the rocks, give your offerings to the ground. It's been here forever and it communicates with you, so just listen. The answers are there. So Sophie, I also would like you to talk a little bit more about your idea around Culture COP and how that can be like an alternative movement to the COP we are here right now, and that's been going on for 27 times, and to where are we at right now?
I want to talk about that in a minute, but I want to just link. I've been working in the music industry for Earth% for a little while, and it links so well to your confusion and difficulty around how to tell the right stories about the climate change, and also your complete link to us it's all about relationships and how we are working within the realms of giving as opposed to receiving. And what we found within the music industry is that there's many musicians and who want to give back, but when they want to talk about climate change, whoop, their viewers or their followers go down. And because it's not like a spicy new story, it's like, oh God, doom and gloom again. And so we've been working with lots of them.
Sounds very familiar.
Right? It's like, how do we make this sexy is what the politicians always want to ask. And like, it's funny to joke about it, but also it's not. The power of music, the importance of musicians in this is that they are trusted. They have not, politicians are just, people roll their eyes and they disregard them and look at what they've done to this world. Like, we don't trust them. Sorry, if you're here, we would love to help you, tell better stories. Musicians spend their lives writing poetry, telling stories, and making us understand what it is to relate, let's say. And so through their songs, of course, they're teaching us how to relate to the lands and with ourselves, and everything you take from music is kind of from nature. But actually using their platforms as well, because as opposed to these distrusted politicians, you've got these uber fans of musicians who can go out and tell a story about climate change that will allow for their whole community, which essentially could be the whole world who doesn't listen to music, making change surrounding climate change and climate justice. And so what we found was telling the story that is true to them, that is true to their own story within climate change was the way to go. So people are just constantly looking for the truths, right? That's what we're looking for. Yeah. So I wanted to talk about that first, because I think it is important. Music and the power of music. And the power of music has been at the forefront of so many revolutions, right? Like from way back in time. And yet, like, culture isn't, like, it's beautiful now. There's, like, amazing charities like Julie's Bicycle and many other kind of, and Culture Heritage Network and many other charities and organizations that are doing things in culture. Hub Culture Hub now exists. This is amazing. But like, how do we use culture to bring truth and light into the forefront of the people making change? Because it's not for us, right? We're just cogs in this system. How do we get it to the right people making the right changes? And this is why COP is such a vessel for change, because we're all here communicating in the same places, making relationships, and this is it. This is the moment to actually come together, but speak truthfully, and speak with heart, and speak with integrity, and care for each other. And this is the beginning. This is what we were wanting to, and we're so desperate to do at Culture COP. It's about a movement of people that care, a family, and we're really hoping that will still be the case. And the reason it exists is because there's a lot of friendships here who are ever growing, and it's a web of humans relating, caring, and looking out for each other. And I think it's important.
Very much so. Thank you. Emily, something you would like to add on? You also said earlier capitalism was a problem.
I mean, if we don't address the elephant in the room, we can't create solutions. So we need to recognize first that we have this idea that we can have infinite growth. Capitalism essentially is the idea that we can continue to grow infinitely. That's how capital is built, and then more capital is created. We have to have a forever growth mechanism. We live on a planet of finite resources. It is impossible logically to have an economic system and a mentality as humans, because that's what became our belief system, capitalism. It transcended from being the economic system to our belief system and how we're living our lives every day in accumulation of material goods as well. How can we live in a world with finite resources and our belief system be infinite growth and infinite use of those resources at whatever cost? At one point, it's not going to work anymore. And we're meeting that point now. The division is now. The revolution happens not because we're choosing to create the revolution. The revolution happens organically because what our environment is showing us that it's rebelling against what we've been doing. It is absolutely in rebellion now with climate catastrophe because we're no longer in a place of climate change. We are in a place of climate catastrophe. We need to call a spade a spade. We see in hurricane season and typhoon season and monsoon and fire season and flood season. I mean, look at Pakistan, look at Nigeria, look at all of you guys all know what's going on. Thus, there has to be a reason and there has to be solutions created by being honest about what that reason is. If we accept and say the truth, then we can grow to create more solutions around the problem. But because we're not saying the truth, that this problem is being caused by capitalism, and some people are, but not enough of us, and not enough of us in this room, because we still have this idea that we want to continue to grow, that our material possessions and our riches are what denotate the value of who we are in this lifetime. Again, the belief system intertwined with the economic. We need to separate those two things, come back to ourselves as human and our connection to the earth and our connection to ecology, and then start creating solutions outside of capitalism that can heal. Not green technology, not net zero, not you building this building and then I'm gonna buy 5 acres of, or 5 hectares of land from indigenous community and plant trees while creating more colonialization and human dominant structures. It doesn't work like that. That does not work. So if we can be honest about it and say we're doing the wrong things, we need to recreate new structures, then we can put our minds together and say, okay, we have this technology. What are the resources we can share? What are the solutions that we can actually create that can help us? Because, guys, we're running out of time. We don't have until 2050 to reach net zero the way that we're net zeroing now. We don't even have enough land in the world to create net zero by 2050 with the land that we have now. It's impossible. So we need to start thinking about this now, be honest about where we're going, because the revolution is gonna come if we don't create the right things. The revolution is already coming now. We see it with XR, we see it with people in the streets. People are facing a living wage crisis. They cannot pay their energy bills, they cannot pay for food, for heating, for electricity. We are in the middle of a social and environmental injustice time, and it's going to only get worse and exacerbated, and that's why we have to be honest about what's happening so we can then create solutions and come with our best efforts to do this in this time, because people are dying, and that's the reality. 1/3 of Pakistan was underwater. 30 million people displaced. That's a huge amount of people displaced. 30 million people. That's insane. People, dead bodies floating in the water. Like, we don't see that because these are brown people or people that we don't associate with every single day of our lives. But these are human lives. These are babies and children. And that, to me, is the part that is like the mirror. When I see this, when I see the babies, when I see what's happening in Somalia, Ethiopia, the 5th crop failure, the 5th drought, the 5th crop failure, and 250,000 babies that are needing support for food that are dying. Like, come on, this is not just like a commercial here. This is real life. We must approach it like this. We must approach the ideas of what are we not doing right, and what can we do better, and how can we go forward in this.
Absolutely, thank you. And also, how can we start with ourselves first? Yeah. That really begins there, and go back to having a peaceful movement and a silent movement, and how can we do that in a different way, maybe not have the typical violent revolution, but maybe have a peaceful evolution where we all go together and raising consciousness by starting with ourselves first. So would any of you would like to elaborate on that point?
Go on, Nat.
I was following up on what you were saying about truthful stories and how much I value the work of Earthrise and Alice, because humans, we have evolved with stories, with myths. We become the stories that we tell. I know this better than a lot of people as an actress, and it's really disheartening to me to see the stories coming out of Hollywood. The last 2 scripts I received in the last few weeks contained some mega names that I won't mention here. And the first one was about assassins, and the second one was about hitmen. It's like, come on. This is what we're becoming. And when you look at the amount of violence in the world, it's no wonder we're literally being programmed that way. It's called programming for a reason. So if we want to evolve our consciousness, if we want to evolve and mitigate, if not hopefully avoid completely this disaster that we're heading towards, we have to change the stories we're telling. And I had this quote that I heard today that I thought was very poignant. When the stories a society shares become out of tune with its circumstances, they can become self-limiting, even a threat to survival. That is our current situation. We're allowing ourselves to be distracted by stories that are actually impeding our evolution, that are stopping us from evolving our human consciousness. And so I just really encourage, I'm so grateful for the work of Alice and Earthrise and everyone else on this panel, taking the power of storytelling back, understanding that a certain group of people, dare I say a monoculture of people, are in charge of telling most of the stories in the world. The reason why I received those 2 scripts was because the head of those studios are white men. And so we have to be also sharing this platform, sharing the stage, sharing the power with people from the Global South, with indigenous people who do have different stories to tell that can potentially, hopefully, lead us in another direction that isn't doom and gloom. And I'll leave it at that.
Can I just riff off that and end on a
continue.
note that deeply, deeply inspires me? I've been ridiculously lucky to travel all around the world, tell amazing stories, meet incredible people, work with David Attenborough, Obama, etc. But the person who most inspires me in the world right now and who I'm very lucky to be making a film about is the Brazilian indigenous leader, Sonia Guajajara. For around 3 months ago, she told me that she was going to run for election in Brazil and try to make it into Congress. And in my heart, I immediately knew she would or hoped she would. And immediately, I thought somebody has to document this unbelievably historic moment, possibly the most consequential election ever in the history of the planet. The difference between a Bolsonaro and a Lula government, the details of that are not lost on us. About 4 weeks ago, Sonia won the election, which was the most extraordinary moment, so much joy, but actually padded in total terror because Bolsonaro did so much better in that election. And then, of course, just recently, last week, Lula won, which is incredible. So all this to say, I really encourage you to follow Sonia. It's the next iteration of the incredibly well-organized Brazilian indigenous movement. There is an amazing spiritual movement, but there is also an extraordinary political movement. They are doing some of the most innovative communications and storytelling, really worth checking out Media India, and following leaders like Sonia Guajajara, Salia Chacriabá, the Anmiga, which is a collection of indigenous women across Brazil. Thank you, guys. Just wanted to share that.
We have 3 more minutes. Would anyone like to ask a question? Yeah.
Thanks. My question is actually for Nat, as a fellow Quechua sister, Aho. How do you recommend that, or what do you think about changing the narrative around the tokenization of indigenous communities for storytelling? Now you see all these ayahuasca retreats, you see all of this exploitation of indigenous culture in a way that a person that's not necessarily educated can say they're celebrating it. And fundamentally, there is a tokenization of that. How can you expand on combating that?
I just want to just caveat everything with the fact that even though I was born in Peru and I am of indigenous heritage, I was lucky enough to be raised in Australia in very privileged circumstances. So I'm speaking right now for indigenous communities while acknowledging I've never had that experience of being dispossessed from my land personally. But I would say the number one message coming from indigenous communities in terms of requests for meaningful allyship is land back. And that's something I really hope is brought up in this arena of real estate and future cities. Do those futures include giving land back to indigenous people? The Bay Area has a wonderful example of this with Sogorea Trust. I encourage everybody to look that one up. And this is where a highly urbanized city managed to buy some land and say, we are going to give this back, put this in a trust for the indigenous people who we displaced here within a city, and let them restore it, rewild it, have a place to have their meaningful cultural events and celebrate their culture in ways that they haven't been able to because we've kicked them off their land in the name of real estate and development. So how can now the real estate and development community here acknowledge that and make amends and figure out ways to meaningfully include indigenous people in land ownership and stewardship, not just put somebody with feathers at the door to greet people so people can think, oh, we're in touch with indigenous communities. They want land back. They want co-stewardship of the lands that they have stewarded for millennia, whose resources we have squandered in just 500 years. So I'll leave it at that because I could talk about this one forever. But I think if anyone here wants to have not just have tokenist participation of indigenous communities, look into Sogorea Land Trust and other examples of urban communities help transferring land back to indigenous communities through trusts.
And just as a note, we're still taking land from indigenous communities. We don't need to give land, we need to give land back, and we need to stop taking land. Thus, not net zeroing things out. The ideas we're having around climate solutions are still colonizing land from indigenous people, taking them, extracting, growing cattle, growing crops, creating dominance for other cultures other than the indigenous. So it needs to be land back and to stop taking the land. How do we stop with these, giving the land defenders are getting pushed on for the fossil fuel industry, for developing pipelines and taking huge swaths of indigenous land all over the world. And so we still are in the place of colonization for that, for natural resources and the idea of extractivism. So stop the extraction and then give the land back at the same time.
Right. I think we're at the end of our session, so please give a huge applause to these passionate women. And thank you, Tony and Jimena, for putting on this beautiful panel.
Guys, could you come in for the panel? Panel starting. Guys, panel starting. Panel starting. All right, we'll get started. All right, Patricia, take it away.
Hello, hello. Can we get started?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being here with you. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a few questions for you, but I just wanted to get 1 minute of a quick introduction and background of each one of you. And then we'll be talking about cities and the role that they play for us to reduce the emissions of CO2 and to become a better and sustainable world for everyone.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Francisco Benedito. I'm the CEO for Climate Trade and the chairman of Climate Coin. I've been working in the space since 2017. I've been a former banker I was banker for 15 years. So we created Climate Coin in 2017 as the first tokenized asset in the world for carbon credits and climate-related assets. Today I'm fully working in the carbon credits marketplace that we run, and bringing like some of the biggest corporations in the world working with us, like more than 500 corporations in Europe, and now more than 11,000 members in the marketplace all around the world, present in 5 countries. Very happy to be here to see if we can provide some inputs through tokenization, future of cities, and what we can do about bringing sustainable finance also to locally and democratized. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Carlos Segarra. I am part of an organization called Sacha Mama, and we are based in Miami, but we work around the global south. We work on communications and community engagement, mainly on communities of color, around climate action, and the need to really bring diverse voices to the conversation. So excited and grateful to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Carlos.
Hi, my name is Hank Rogers. My background is computer games, but I switched to environmentalism. I have a foundation in Hawaii. We work to end the use of carbon-based fuel in Hawaii. Now I have a new NGO based in New York to end the use of carbon-based fuel in the rest of the world.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, Tashi Delek. This means hello in my language, Tibetan, and I'm Lobsang Yangso, and so this means a lot for the Tibetans, because the Tibetans do not have official delegation in the COP meetings because Tibet is an occupied country. So this is the kind of space that every Tibetan gets to voice about the climate crisis in Tibet. And so I was born in Tibet, and so since '91 I have been in exile in India. And so I work for International Tibet Network as an environment researcher, and so we focus a lot on climate issues in Tibet, and then lobby and then advocate on environment issues in Tibet as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. So we see that we have amazing panelists here to reflect about a very complicated thing that we all want to do here. The name of our event here by Tony shows is Future of Cities. And there is an important reflection for us to make. What if I tell you that our cities occupy only 3% of the land mass in the world, and we have around half of the population in the world living in cities? It's different in a few places in the world. Like, by the way, Latin America is one of the places where we have the highest concentration of people living in cities, so it's between 70 and 80% of the population. Similar to that as in the US. Aside from that, most of the places in the world is around 50%. So we have 3% of the land mass, nearly half of the population, but 3/3 of the emissions of carbon. So in the cities, we concentrate most of our problem today. We were talking about how we are now depleting all the nature that we have in the world. We talked in the previous panels about how we could go back to our ancestral roots. And we do have this big situation in which we have most of our population living in cities and moving to cities as well, and where we concentrate most of the emissions of carbon. So my question to you, it's a very complex question, but the topic here is how we can achieve net zero by 2045. We know that in the UN, the target's between 2049 and 2050. We are trying to accelerate that, and we are talking about getting net zero by 2045. So my question to you is, what are the main roadblocks for us to achieve this goal, especially in the cities? We can take a round. So,
do you want me to start? Okay. So, I think the solution is the solution that we have to do is public and private, right? Always. So we started to talk about democratization of climate change. So citizens need to be involved in the equation. So that's why we need to split the efforts that we need to do between all of us. Cities are key. These are some concept of blended finance, right? We need to bring money from different sources to try to scale up the solutions that can make the difference. So, in my opinion, like the IRA in the United States is one big effort from the public sector, and then we have to complement with philanthropy. We have to complement for citizens. And I put you one example. 2 months ago, we launched with a big bank and MasterCard the possibility of calculating and offsetting the part of your credit card payments around the world. So you are bringing, if you trace that with blockchain, you can bring positive impact in the real projects that can generate positive impact. Imagine if you can do it locally in the cities. So I mean, we have to bring, wherever you generate the harm, you have to bring the solutions. So that's why we partner with Future Cities, bringing that type of solutions locally, where you generate the harm. You know, so that's the approach that we are working on.
very nice, and maybe a follow-up question for you to keep going here. We are talking about cities, but we need to remember we have here people from different places in the world. And one of the things that we've been talking about, if you want to achieve a world that it is net zero, we need to understand the different realities in the different regions. And one of the biggest issues that we all face here is the rising inequality. We don't have the same situations for everyone in the world. And even COP was created in a context of climate justice, because most of the countries and most of the people who today are facing the challenges of climate change are the poor people, the people that don't have the conditions, and the countries that also issue the least carbon are the ones who are facing the main challenges. So if you think about the roadblocks and keep going on the answers, but with these in mind of the reality of inequalities that we face around the world, so would the roadblocks change in any way for you, and which one would you pick as the main one for us to face and fight together? Carlos, you can.
Yes. I think that one of the biggest challenges that we have here, kind of globally speaking, is climate finance, and how we make sure that we, as an international community, we commit to fill the pledge that we said that we were going to fill in Glasgow, about $100 billion to developing countries. And not that the money itself is going to solve these issues, but it's going to be a catalyzer for many solutions that are going to be implemented at a local level. One of those solutions, or one of the issues that is going to fix, is the lack of trust in the system. A little bit of what you were saying of how these events are very niche specific and very secluded for the realities of a diverse group of individuals and communities. So by the international community really investing and making sure that they fulfill that pledge, they will help rebuild that trust that needs to be rebuilt in order to really, bring all of us together, all the different communities, in this kind of human transformation that we need to put forward as we kind of face all these challenges. One of them just is 250, but making sure that we get to net zero in 250, but we have many other challenges. We have these moonshots that we are set to achieve in the next 30 to 40 years, like, protect 30% of nature and oceans by 2030, the implementation of the Paris Agreement. All of that will only be fulfilled if we're able to rebuild the trust that has been broken because of this lack of inclusivity in all these conversations.
Thank you. Thank you. What's your view?
Well, my view, first of all, I'm not the doom and gloom guy. We're talking about cities today. There are 100 major cities in the world that are already at 70% renewable energy. 70%. So if you look at countries, they're really bad. If you're looking at states, they're a little bit better. But cities are actually doing the best. And as you say, 50% of the people in the world live in cities today. By 2050, there will be 68% of the people in the world will live in cities. I feel that we are making the transition, especially in cities, we are making the transition. And when you have energy that is localized, I mean concentrated, like in cities, the solution is much easier. If you have energy that's spread out a huge area, it's more difficult. So I think that cities are a good solution for the future, for people, and for the concentration of energy. I don't look at it as doom and gloom. I think we're making serious progress. And people ask me if I have hope, and the answer is no, I don't have hope. I have determination. We are actually going to fix this problem. Just like we fixed every other problem that has gotten us through history, like World War II or whatever, we're going to fix it. It's just a matter of time. I prefer that we do it sooner rather than later, but we are definitely doing this.
My answer to this is that with the case of Tibet, the roadblock or the challenges to achieve net zero by 2045 is the colonialism and the Chinese occupation of Tibet. When we look at Tibet or the Tibetan plateau, Tibet makes the 2% of the whole world mass, and then it also contains almost 1/5 of world's soil carbon. And Tibet is also known as the third pole, where almost 1.4 billion Asian populations are dependent on the 10 major rivers that flow from Tibet. And Tibet has a huge glaciers and permafrost and grasslands. And these grasslands absorb carbon. But because of the Chinese illegal occupation of Tibet, the unsustainable and unscientific policies in terms of rapid infrastructure development and urbanization and mining is a big problem in Tibet. And so in the recent case, China has moved almost 2 million Tibetan nomads from their grassland and blaming the Tibetan nomads for the grassland degradation that is happening in Tibet. And when the Tibetans nomads have been removed, so they have been there for almost 8,000 years, but the Chinese, they don't include Tibetans in their climate policies. So I think with the case of Tibet and also with the lots of downstream nations that we Tibetans have, it is the Chinese colonialism and occupation that is the challenge that we are facing, and that is for us stopping to achieve net zero.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your sharing, because I believe I'm usually an optimist as well, Henk, but I do believe that we have one problem today in the world, that the leaders who are leading the countries, they do have much more power than we'd like them to have in terms of the decisions on how to take a net zero journey. I was now in a country in Brazil with 4 years of a president who was definitely not sharing the same journey, even though Brazil is a democracy. So I can share what you feel every day there. And what we could see at the same time, being an optimist here, that one thing happened. Not a single president before in Brazil had mentioned the Amazon in their international speeches every day. Bolsonaro did. He did in a bad way. And many people got united as ever. If you go to Brazil now, you see indigenous people who before fought because they didn't share the same traditions, the same habits. They are all together fighting for the Amazon. If you see even the private sector, if you see all the people from different sectors, they are getting together to fight for the Amazon, understanding that the role that the Amazon has, not only to Brazil, but to the world. That has to do with the rescue of our culture and our ancestral culture. If I share my personal story here, like I was a partner at McKinsey where I was a businesswoman for more than 20 years, and I was helping different countries and different cities actually to apply the same economic model that Europe, that the US, that China has been applying for so many centuries. But this model is extractive. And this model is a model that takes nature out, take people out as well, produce a lot, sometimes produces wealth, but not for everyone. In the case of Brazil, we didn't even manage to grow. We didn't grow. We increased inequality. We are not fair to people. We are not fair to nature. And even in my case, I made a mistake because I tried to help the country grow, imitating the models that we learned from other countries. Then, you know, and by the way, in my case, I'm a daughter and a granddaughter of an indigenous woman who was actually kidnapped by a miner. Then my grandmother had 7 kids. He took the kids away from her. And I never saw my grandmother. Then 20 years later, I learned that actually, unfortunately, I didn't have the opportunity to live with my grandmother. I actually lived with my grandfather. I remember I loved him a lot. But it's been a journey for me to value what my grandmother was. You know, her fight, and her fight was a fight that was in silence. And now the indigenous people are having the chance to speak up again. In the previous panel, we're supposed to have Wanda here with Toto. She could not make it here because she's right now in the blue zone with the General Secretary, with a lot of indigenous people who came all the way to Egypt to represent our countries. And it's the first time that we have so many indigenous people here all together. It was a long introduction to a question to you, which is, how can we rescue our ancestral roots, go back to the beginning, and relearn? Sometimes the future is ancestral. Sometimes the futures go back to our roots. And I think that's the case for us now. But how we can recreate our economic models and go back to our culture and our roots to make it happen.
Well, I can put you an example of a project we've been working with for maybe 4 years already, Peru. Madre de Dios. In Peru, Madre de Dios, there is a gold mining intensive activity, which is devastating all the forestry, right? So basically, there is a project that they cultivate Brazilian nuts, and they generate carbon credits. So the community lives there, they have houses, they have schools, they have everything, thanks to that positive impact that we are generating with that carbon credits for real, right? That can be replicated. The problem of the countries is 2 problems. Normally, lack of emerging markets, lack of money. I mean, they don't have enough funding for the country. They have deficits, big deficits, that they cannot support the poverty of their countries. And then they cannot monetize the green gold they have. We need to bring that green gold back again. We have to bring that green gold, some initiatives that are around the world, in order to exchange for other sources of production that you are talking about, right? Some people tell me, hey, what I'm going to do if I'm not working in agribusiness? You say, why don't you generate regenerative ag, and then you compensate the increased costs with carbon credits, for example. That's what we are doing. We just closed an agreement with 35 countries to do that, right? So it is bringing solutions that really generate positive impact at a scale, right? So about ancient cultures, in my opinion, it's like these people don't want to work with the companies that generate the harm for them. Imagine oil companies, mining companies. If you go to them and say, no, I prefer cut the trees than generate conservation areas, generate carbon credits that will buy these people that hold them to make money out of them. Like the oil companies are not buying the carbon credits to offset the carbon footprint. They are buying it to speculate with them, right? So we need to provide traceability to the money. That's the solution. But to the governments also. If the IRA comes up, do we know that money is going to be generated in a good manner? It's going to be executed in a good manner, that project? We need to trace. I remember the words of Elon Musk like maybe 1 year ago. do you want me to end poverty? I can give 60 billion. Tell me where my money is going. That's exactly what we mean with blockchain. No? We need to go where my money is going. I need to know if my money is going to generate any positive impact or not at a scale, right? That's the same for communities. We want communities to make money out of generating positive impact in that communities, and we can trace that. So the money can be flowing from developing countries to undeveloped countries or emerging markets, and now the countries are going to be the generators, the originators of that green gold. So I think that's the solution, or part of the solution at least.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Carlos?
I love the way that you framed that question on how do we kind of have to look back in order to kind of move forward. I think that yes, there's a lot of things that need to happen, and we need to move, throughout different sectors. But then also we also need to move like interdimensionally as well. We need to move from a personal level to a collective, and I think that's where the cultural work plays a great space here. Understanding that we can not only point fingers and say, hey, to the governments, to the companies, but also we need to look at ourselves individually and say, hey, what is it that I am doing? What is my role on this creation? How am I redefining my dream? A dream that brings everyone on board rather than just fulfill unique needs into a reality I want to create for myself. So there's a saying in Quechua that it says summa causai. And summa causai is meaning good living. It's part of the teachings of my tradition. And really what it asks us to do is to look on how we relate to each other, how I relate to myself, how I relate to you, and how I relate to nature. And I think that is the space where culture plays such a key role, because we need to be able to not only build accountability individually for the work that we're all doing, but then also create the solutions and the opportunities for all communities to see themselves reflected in this story. One of the challenges that we have right now is that diverse communities are not seeing themselves in this story. So if they're not in that picture, they're not related to it, they're not answering the call to that picture. So we need to make sure that we bring everyone on board, and that's, culture is the platform that does that.
Oh, very nice. Thank you, Carlos. Henk?
Yeah, so, the answer is not so simple. We can't go back to living the way indigenous people used to live. There's too many of us. If we were to go back to the forest and live in the forest and eat animals in the forest or whatever it is, there would be no animals left. There's just too many of us. So what we need to do is we need to understand what's the function of the indigenous culture. And the function of the indigenous culture is to live in harmony with nature. And that's what we have to realize. It may be different today than it was 1,000 years ago to live in harmony. Because, for example, in the old days, there was no such thing as plastic. So if you had garbage and you threw it out, the garbage became compost and plants grew and it just went back to nature. But today, if we throw out the garbage out the window, it stays there for 1,000 years. And so we can't just say, let's go back to the way things were, because that's impossible. There's just too many of us. So to live in harmony with nature, what we have to do is we have to make sure that we're not taking more from nature than nature can give. So right now, we're producing more carbon dioxide than nature can absorb. And we do this every year. And so the carbon dioxide is building up, and it's causing global warming. We have to reduce our carbon emissions to the point where nature can absorb it faster than we produce it. That's the beginning of us living with nature, or living in harmony with nature. I think at the end of the day, if we stop using all fossil fuel, that will be a giant step in the right direction. I believe that we can do this by 2045. That is my mission, is to end the use of carbon-based fuel by 2045. We can absolutely do this. If you go back in time, when we faced an existential crisis, it was World War II. We went from from biplanes to jet planes. We invented sonar, radar, missiles, cruise missiles, and the atom bomb using 1940s technology. We did this in 5 years. This is 2022. There isn't anything we can't do today. All we need is willpower.
Over here, what I want to say is that nowadays big companies and authoritarian states, they make lots of plans and projects and not really respecting the values and the knowledge of indigenous communities and local communities. So my suggestion is that you should include the voices and you should include the local communities and indigenous people in your policy making decision. You can't just come there and say that this is the way that you should live and we're going to take your land and we're going to give you some money. And so I think in that case, indigenous communities or the local communities such as Tibetans, they have lived on this land for so long and they understand their nature. And you can't imitate what is happening in some other country and then, implement same thing over there. And but people think that people who are in a rural area or in the mountains or in the forest, they think that their understanding or their knowledge is very unscientific or barbarian. And with the case of Tibet, I think the Chinese say that the way the Tibetan nomads live is very unmodern and very they say that your way of living is very traditional. We want to modernize you and we want to make you rich. And so this is the way that is happening. And I feel that till here I think this is like COP27. No Tibetan from Tibet has ever participated any of the COP meetings. If this discussion happens in Tibet, we will all be in jail. Tibetans inside Tibet get arrested and jailed for 10 years and 15 years for protecting the environment. So I think sometimes, being optimistic is, it feels good. It makes us feel, positive. But my request or suggestion is that nowadays lots of Western countries and the big companies, they make lots of investment in Tibet or in any of the, I think the developing countries. I request that before you decide anything, go and see where you are making any policies. Ask the locals whether this is what you think that helps you or the nature. Otherwise, I think people, as we said, that achieving net zero or whatever, these big terms, we are destroying the whole ecosystem and not really value. And so the tradition, even in Tibet case, the Buddhism and the Buddhist religion plays a really vital role in terms of environment protection policies and practices. But the state makes no recognize or understand that. And so some people in big cities, in Beijing, they make the policies in Tibet. And so that is the problem that we face. And so I think that my answer is to include the local communities or the indigenous or the local Tibetan nomads in your policy making and let them decide what they want.
Thank you so much. So we are getting now to the final remarks. We talked about solutions. You mentioned many of those here. If you'd choose, I think we talked a lot about optimism, but at the same time, justice that needs to be done, people who have been silenced for so long. I've been working economic development, science and technology for many years. I started redirecting my focus to sustainability, especially after the pandemic, because I used to work with healthcare and I saw how the change in nature is causing all this imbalance in our world, and especially in healthcare as one of the examples. But I also realized that the people who's been in this journey for so long, they feel a little bit lonely and almost a little bit, how can I say, tired. And now that we have many people waking up, right? When you go and try to work together with the environmentalists who's been, people are going to jail. So sometimes they are not so open as you imagine that they would be, and we understand why. So for us to take the next step is going to require a combination of optimism, but also forgiveness and openness. And my question to you, for us to end in a high note, what would be your advice for us to work more closely together? As Tony beautifully said, that we need to leave our ego aside and work all together. It's not a one-man or one-woman show or solution. It's a solution that requires every one of us working together and rebalancing the power in the world as well, giving more of a voice to the global south, right? Giving more of a voice to the people that have been silenced for so long. So what would be your final remark to give us this inspiration to work more closely together?
I would say two things. One of my friends the other day was saying, Frank, we have to put together all our superpowers, right? So every one of us has a superpower experience in their lives. We have what we've been experimenting in our jobs, our life, all what we've been doing. No? So if I'm good at finance and I bring some solutions for finance, and you're good in real estate, you have solutions for sustainability in real estate, let's apply it together, but let's make it at scale, right? Let's make it big, let's make it, because at the end, if not, small impact generates solutions. It has the aggregation of all that small impacts generates that scale, no? And second thing is education, right? We need to educate the people how things work. Because if not, it's just talking and talking and talking. Yeah, we all want to save the planet or save ourselves because the planet is going to remain here. And the thing is that we have to generate real solutions that for real we arrive to 2045, no? So that's something that we need to look at that solutions. There are, for example, drawdown project bringing solutions that at a scale can bring that solutions, no? So I think that we have to apply what already is here, bring innovation at scale, and every one of us has to make their small contribution to it.
Thank you, Francisco. Thank you very much.
I'll say that for me it's about thinking globally and acting locally. I mean, everything that we're talking about, these huge moonshots that we have that are all doable and achievable, at the end of the day, they have a local impact and they have a local solution. So we got to make sure that when we're thinking locally, that we bring all voices into the space. If we find ourselves in spaces that are all talking the same language, then we got to question ourselves, like who's missing in the conversation? Mm-hmm. Because we are clearly not seeing the whole picture. So always when we do these local implementations, let's look for diverse voices, let's look for diverse realities, diverse interests that will enrich the conversations and the solutions that we want to bring forward.
Thank you.
So this panel is about 2045. We are today on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and they started in 2015 and they end in 2030. Then we have another 15 years that start in 2030, end in 2045, which is the 100th anniversary of the United Nations. So what is going to happen in the 15 years? In those 15 years, I believe we should call them the regenerative development goals. It's where we put back everything that we've taken. It's where we fix everything that we've broken. It's where we give back everything to nature that nature needs to, for us to survive. That's the one thing. And the other thing is we form an alliance. That's how we won World War II. We form an alliance. All the NGOs, all the companies, all the people need to all be on the same side of this issue, because it's an existential threat. And if the enemy is growth or whatever it is, we all have to unite and figure out how to combat and how to fix that. So welcome to the Blue Planet Alliance. This is our alliance. All NGOs are welcome. At the end of the day, we're all going to be one voice, one really loud voice, because the problem is all the NGOs, no matter how big they are still small compared to OPEC. And when we say something, they just kind of like knock us off the table. We're a tiny voice. But if we unite, we can have a big voice. And that big voice is what the world needs right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with what sir, you mentioned. I think collaborating and learning from each other and supporting each other is really, really essential, especially having voices from different backgrounds, different countries, And so that is one. And then in terms of sustainable development would be, I think, is the second, because nowadays, everything is so, the rapid urbanization and modernization is a big problem, especially in the whole Himalaya belt, in India, in Tibet, in Ladakh area, in Bhutan. So I think sometimes the whole Himalaya belt is very much prone to earthquakes. But the states are building large dams, and these large dams can cause earthquakes, and earthquakes also can destroy the large dams. So I think sustainable development is really, really important. And I think the world has, I think, enough information of what is happening in Amazon, but then what actually happening in Himalaya, on the Himalaya or in Tibet is very little information that world has. I think so. That's I also recommend or request that transparency and scientific research is really much needed in the whole of the Himalaya belt and also in Tibet as well. And when you do that research, include the local communities in the research. And so I think this would give a little bit of progressive or progress and positive outcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. With that, we finish our panel. Thanks a lot, Tony, for the invitation. Thanks, Alex, our partner here, who is launching AYA as well. About coalitions, I just wanted to remember that AYA is a global coalition based in the Global South. AYA means ancestral spirits, and the idea is exactly that, for us to get together and start working on solutions that can become global and scale up the nature-based solutions for us to keep working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, panelists. We're going to do a photo. So if I can get you guys to look at Carolina. She's going to do a photo, and then we're going to welcome, she's right here. We're going to welcome our next panel, or Jurgis is going to welcome our next panel, our muse. You guys, watch out, guys. Thank you.
1, 2, 3. Great camera. 2045.
Yo, 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 yo. Some are living in the future, some are living in the past, some are living in the present, making every moment last. Some are living in the future, some are living in the past, some are living in the present, making every moment last.
Gracias, hermano. See you, man. So, we're doing a partnership with Jor from Super Nature. We're wrapping the whole building with a vision of Miami that's going to be up. We partner with the city of Miami.
But also the narratives that will take us there, and the storytelling, the co-created visions that will inspire us and fill us with all that beautiful, succulent, intoxicating, regenerative air.
Give thanks and praise to the Most High of song, of dance, of culture, of plants.
All right, very nice. Because we believe the future is both regenerative and co-created, we would ask you all to hold clapping a little bit while people take their seats. Let's create a bit of a vibe right here. And we've got the song we've been writing with Stephen Brooks. Ta, cha, keep it up, taka ta, taka da. We've been writing the song with Stephen Brooks over the past couple of weeks, which we have not finished, but you're welcome to sing along, or at least to try to go, yeah. Some are living in the future, some are living in the past, some are living in the present, making every moment last. Some are living in the future, some are living in the past, some are living in the present, making every moment last.
So just as we're getting ready up here on the panel, that the words came from people in the tropics. They live in the present because they can. They have bananas and papayas and things produced all year. People in the temperate live in the future. They have to store firewood. They have to preserve food. People in the desert, they live in the past because they have to. It's survival. They live like their grandparents did, and their grandparents, and their grandparents. And that was the root of the song.
Ready?
Some are living in the
future, some are living in the past, some are living in the present, making every moment last. Some are living in the future, some are living in the past, some are living in the present, making every moment last.
So this is our last panel of the evening, guys, and we saved the best for last, of course, as we always do. Just saying.
Organization called the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet. We are based out of New York, and we have a global footprint. More on that later during the panel. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Keith Agoda, CEO of Producers Trust. We're a global network of agricultural producers and organizations that support them. And we work to help them capture their data and use it for beneficial purposes for farmers to make more money and to incentivize a supply chain transition to sustainability.
Awesome. Stephen?
My name is Stephen Brooks, and I am first and foremost an ethnobotanist, which is the study of the relationship between humans and plants. I live in a valley where I co-founded 3 communities where we're currently 200 families from 40 countries. And Louis is one of them. And we are, really trying to figure out, can we merge conservation, agriculture, and where we live in the same place rather than have a national park here, farm here, and live here? How can we merge those things?
Hello, my name is Velasca Hernandez. I'm the founder and CEO of the Visionist Advisors, a global agency based in Paris and New York. We created a method called the RE concept. RE means again, the opportunity we have to do it again better. So that is our mission, and we're spreading awareness not only to businesses, organizations, but also humans, to be able to believe in that possibility of improving, refining, redefining, and reorienting in life and in the business world too.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to start generally on that side. I just wanted to ask Velasca, storytelling is so important. How have you seen it transform communities?
We have an experience with a project we implemented recently in Cannes, in the Cannes Film Festival. So we created the Venezuela Film Hub. My family is from Venezuela. I was born in California, but I am Venezuela by heart. And we created this platform called Venezuela Film Hub. The first pavilion of Venezuela in the Cannes Film Festival, a private and independent one. And we had the opportunity to tell a new story about our country. It's been 15 or 20 years of bad news from Venezuela for reasons that we're not gonna go into details. So this time we decided to reorient the story and present ourselves again as a country to the world. And it was through film, through art, to reconnect people with our culture, because we have been kind of forgotten or put on the side. So while that's one of our case studies, that we can reaffirm that the storytelling is relevant and can change the perspective, not only of us as individuals, but also for a country. And well, if we go into brands and organizations, that's what we focus on in the agency, it has no doubt that storytelling is the way to communicate a new chapter.
Stephen?
Yeah, storytelling. So Yeah, it's so profound. I had this incredible opportunity. I was showcased my work in Costa Rica on this Netflix show with Zac Efron called Down to Earth. And it was the #1 show for 11 days internationally on Netflix. And I couldn't even believe the impact that it had on people. Like I've never really seen something and then like saw the person's name and then found them on Instagram and then sent them a letter. It was just unbelievable how that, yeah, what we did there. And I think it was just seeing that we were questioning the way things are. You know, things are the way they are, but they don't need to be this way any longer. And yeah, I mean, I think for me, the story that I'm constant, I am just freaking obsessed with useful plants. There are so many incredible foods, so many incredible magical plants that are like unknown out of small areas that could radically improve people's lives. So this diaspora, the journey from the homeland of these incredible plants, and it's the quintessential unconditional love. You know, it's like, are we allowed to say shit? Yeah. As we totally just shit on their ecosystem and we totally eradicate and we're losing so many species of plants. They're just keep showing up, wanting to heal us and feed us and bring us beautiful smells and produce beautiful flowers and just nurture us in so many ways. So I feel so guided by the plants and this forgotten language that the plants are all just singing to us constantly. So I almost feel like a bridge between, like a translator almost, from the plants.
And anecdotally, does anyone here know what the most commonly communicated language in the animal kingdom is? Bioluminescence. I know. Feel that one.
Thank you. So at Producers Trust, we use data to tell stories. And first, we have the stories of the farmers in terms of their content. Who are they? What do they grow? What do they produce? But then data can be used to validate and verify that the stories being told are actually authentic. And this technology we created is called Storybird. And we're able to bring together storytelling with data validation. And so I met this guy here, Satya, and I walked into his office in the UN. I was very intimidated about 4 or 5 years ago. And Satya said, okay, go to India. I'm like, really? I've never been. He's like, just go to India, I'll set you up. So I went to India, and he introduced me to this group of regenerative farmers, led by women farmers, and this movement's grown well beyond 1 million, close to 2 million farmers now, who've gone to regenerative farming. And I went out to this rural area in India, and I started talking to these rural farmers and community organizers about our Storybird application, where we're gonna take their data, their storytelling, their information, their content, and then share it with someone in California who's eating their basmati rice. And they were shaking their head, and as you know in India, you're not really sure what it means. And then some guy stood up, he goes, but I want to know about that person in California. And then it hit me that storytelling and connectivity is a two-way street. And too often, myself personally is feeling like we need to share their story to enrich our lives so that people here will really connect with those farmers at the source all over the world. But what I realized is that they also want to know what you're going to make with that basmati rice and who are you and how can I add you as a friend on Facebook. And so what I learned about storytelling is that it's really human connectivity and how we can bring people together through celebration in an authentic and validated way.
Satya?
Thank you. Well, I'll take 2 minutes to tell a story. And the story is, I used to be heading many years ago something called UN Orchid. It was the UN's Red Plus office. It was the UN's Red Plus office, set up by 10 organizations. Ban Ki-moon, the then Secretary General, was super interested. He came down to open the headquarters, which was based out of Jakarta. We spent 4.5 years. There was $1 billion on the table from Norway for Indonesia. Nothing happened. And no fault of Indonesia, no fault of Norway. Both the parties were super interested in making it happen. But when you put money on the table before the impact is generated, it creates lots of problems that you cannot even foresee. And least of all is the bureaucratic problem, you know. Bureaucrats have a tremendous ability of complicating things beyond their own understanding and everybody else's. So 10 years later, Indonesia walked out of the agreement unilaterally, and then now they're talking and they'll come back to doing some things together. But the moral of the story is that public money, whenever you put it, no matter who's giving whom, and that's a conversation we've been having for 30 years. And that is also the conversation that is solely responsible for us still meeting the 27th version of the Conference of Parties. 27 years, we produced this much results. In 2003, if we had actually acted, we needed to reduce our emissions by only 3% every year. Now it's about 9%. And get to 2030, 47%. Impossible. Nobody can reduce their emissions by half every year. That's where we need to get to remain viable. The emissions gap report of the UN just came out, and I know it ad verbatim because I used to be a part of that process. I was their leader till last year when I moved to the Global Alliance for a Sustainable Planet. I was heading the UN's Environment Management Group. That's when I met Keith. The challenge is that we talk a lot and we produce very little. And as a species, you might be very surprised, we are the worst of the 8 million species that exist on the planet. We draw the lifeblood out of what is called the web of life. Steve talked about how plants make us breathe, make us live. We have no gratitude. Zero. That has to change. And that's why, you know, if you go to our website, www.gasp.world, what you will see is it's the narrative stupid. That's what we say. Because the narrative has to change. The narrative has to become about us. Stop pretending that we are helping the planet. We're not helping the planet. The planet will be absolutely fine once we are gone. We have to help ourselves. Our friend talked about the Himalayas. There's something called the Asian brown cloud. All the smoke that you see in Pakistan, North India, Nepal, all accumulates into something called the ABC. That will melt all the glaciers. It is already melting it 30 times faster than in the 80s. Then there will be no river systems left, but that's where the water comes from. That's how the cities survive. So there's nothing called cities and rural areas, hinterlands, catchment areas. Everything is interconnected in the web of life. So we need to find the narrative that actually brings back the true spirit of humanism. What we have built around is amazing, but it can be done sustainably. Every 5 days, we are building a new Paris. Every 5 days. And unless that is sustainable, we'll all be dead before we know. So, more to the power of narratives.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I do have a bit of a follow-up question for you. So, Hank Rogers, shout out for Hank Rogers, wherever you are, you're just an awesome human, was talking about the regenerative development goals. And I would just like to ask a little bit more on that. Like, what do you see as the future of the regenerative development goals? How can we co-create? How can we live in this harmony that you speak of with our environment so that we are regenerating it?
So going back to what Keith was talking about, so I got involved in this project in India in 2017. At that time, I was working pro bono, trying to help a lot of actors find the kind of resolve and the resources for climate action. And so at that time, there were 40,000 farmers. They called themselves a boutique program. I said, boutique? 40,000 farmers. They said, yeah, but you know, we are 6 million farmers in all, so 40,000 is a small number. So, okay, so we built a partnership. It's a partnership of 6 million farmers, most of them women. And now they are way past 1 million farmers. The input costs of farming have dropped by 80%. The yields are anywhere between 28% to 200% more. Water use intensity is 50% of chemical-based farming. Electricity use, because they pump water out of the ground, so electricity use is dropped by 50%. I'm not telling you stories, these are facts proven by serious third-party research, irrefutable facts. When they said, oh, we are using 50% less water, I said, that's anecdotal. Where's the proxy indicator that I can use? So we went around and we found, oh yeah, they pump it out. So there's an electricity. Electricity is paid for by the government. The government in that state pays $1.2 billion every year for farm electricity subsidies. So basically you're paying for your own destruction. You keep pumping water out, water tables keep dropping to levels where you can't even find water anymore, and it's all laced with arsenic, because the less water, the more concentrated all these chemicals become. And so these people, these women, are actually doing something extraordinary. And with less money, more output, and most importantly for the people that live in the cities, it is already proving to be a spectacular gain in public health. Because when you eat food without chemicals, without pesticides, I mean, there's tons of research, I don't even need to quote anybody, that you will live a healthy life lived to its fullest potential. So that's the power of people that have nothing in their lives coming together to do something that we should be doing 100x.
Thank you, thank you. And along those lines, like following the blue zone, ancestral wisdom, and kind of going back into what would be regenerative, I wanted to ask you, Valeska, a little bit about like the possibility of regenerating and creating this regenerative circular economy mindset with youth, and what your project that you just brought on is doing in Tulum.
Yes, well, as I mentioned before, we've been dedicated specifically to the method we created at the Visionist Advisors. So we integrated experts of different kinds, multidisciplinary visionists. We're called the Visionist Advisors. And we started studying the word change, transformation, in different areas. And that's how we came upon with the re concept. So re means again, the prefix re means again. So the re concept combines business strategy, creativity, and emotions through a process that was created by a group of project manager, also experts. And we have a process that starts with rethinking, redefining, reorienting, redirecting business objectives and or personal needs. In the case of our implementation projects, recently we started working with a green school. So Green School Tulum is going to be the 4th green school from the Green School network. And well, as some of you may know, it was born in Bali, so it's Green School Bali. There's one in New Zealand and one in South Africa. So this is the 4th green school, the 1st of America. So this is a perfect example of redefining education, and also from an adaptation perspective, because we cannot change the world. We cannot change the climate. We have to adapt, and it's from adaptation that we can transform. So in this moment, if we adapt to the circumstances of nature and the world, what can we do for this future to be better and to improve? So education is, with no doubt, an avenue that is essential. And Green School Tulum, the 1st of America, is going to become an important source, especially because of the location where it is, that is in the Jaguar National Park of Tulum, and well, a place for children to be closer to nature. We all need nature. Sometimes we feel that we're like getting into these spaces of anxiety in cities and in our daily lives, and then we say I need nature. I need to go to nature. So how can we actually grow, and this is for children that are going to be, that are going to have the possibility to be in this first Green School of America, to grow closer to nature and to have these connections and to study in a new way. So it's reinventing education and going from traditional education to a new kind of learning.
Thank you. That's truly inspiring and so needed in a place that, has really seen some damage, unfortunately. Stephen, hello. How are you over here?
Very, very well.
Great to hear. Since we're talking about adapted and evolved communities, I did want to ask you, how have you and your communities in Costa Rica evolved your food systems, the systems thinking around it? Like, how has that played into regeneration and regenerative agriculture?
Yeah, so what I'm most excited about is perennial agriculture. Is everybody clear the difference between annuals and perennials? Annuals are things you plant, they grow, they flower, they fruit, they die in one season. Perennials are like trees that just keep giving. Bill Mollison, who coined the term permaculture, he used to say, how can we design our realities to maximize hammock time? And hammock time is just kind of like a metaphor for, playing with your children more, or playing an instrument, or doing anything that you like to do. And so what perennial agriculture offers us, it's like we're constantly evaluating the amount of energy it takes to produce anything. So annual agriculture takes so much energy. We have to go in and till the soil, which is releasing all the carbon into the atmosphere. It takes big tractors, or if you're rural and don't have tractors, it takes your bulls or your oxen, or then it takes fertilizer, and it takes fixing the soil and preparing the soil. And then you do it, harvest, and then you have to do it all over again. Where my dear neighbor Patty, may he rest in peace, was my neighbor in Punta Mona. He died in my arms at 84 in 2013, and he used to say, boy, if you plan things right, all you do is reap. Ooh, if you plan things right, all you do is reap. And what I've noticed, I've been on the same property for 30 years, is that in the early days, we spent so much time like putting the trees in and then caring for the trees and then pruning the trees and mulching the trees and taking care of them. And now, all of our labor, all we do is harvest. We just harvest and process. And we have to spend so much less energy to feed ourselves. And the other thing is this perennial diet are some of the most incredible superfoods in the world. And so, you know how the raw foodists, they used to talk about like their raw food diet? Oh yeah, I'm 70-30, I'm 80-20, 80 raw, 20 cooked. I think what we need to start doing is like start thinking, how can I start shifting my diet to eating more perennial foods? And so in our community, we have 4 or 5 kilometers of roads running through it, and we have almost 200 species of fruit and nut and flowering trees along the roadsides. And then the other thing is, like, instead of having a golf course or I don't know what other communities have, like, we have vast gardens, and like our HOA dues, we pay every month a fee, and instead of just having manicured lawns, we get big boxes of food every week. So, I think another thing that's really important is that it's not one or the other. It's not like, oh no, Tony, we got to make communities in the rural areas. No, we got to do the cities. No, we need to do it all. That's what Tony and I will start talking. I was like, yes, I agree with you, and I agree with you. And we all need to be heard. We all need to come together. We need to stop competing. We need to collaborate. We need to find ways to really question everything and come together in these solutions. I just want to close that with my favorite Bill Mollison quote is, as the world's problems become increasingly complex, the solutions remain embarrassingly simple.
That really resonates. It really does. My ancestral lands, we have terraced gardens that have been there for thousands of years. We have Incan trails. My family is some of the largest agriculturists in lettuce and pomegranate farming in Peru. And yeah, right? We'll talk. And I've seen them take a large piece of desert and start growing herbs and start growing lettuce and start growing like larger and larger plants and fruits, and then get to citruses and pomegranates and things like that. And I know them to be, within integrity of their ancestral lands and honoring traditions and, doing things at scale in a way that is sustainable and regenerative, frankly. Nothing goes to waste when you're that far out in the middle of nowhere. And I really wanted to get into it with you, Keith, and just ask you a little bit about how you're keeping other people accountable and how your regenerative agriculture monitoring and platform can really help pave the way for other people to be inspired by regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, so great question. If I want to keep anyone accountable, I have to start with myself.
Yeah.
And continue focused on that process from now
Accountable,
until
buddy.
I die. That's really all my process is how can I hold myself accountable to being my best person and hope that my team also lives by those, models of integrity. And as we live by it, we say, how can we create win-win situations for people to do the right thing? So it isn't a stick, but a carrot for people to, let's say, farm in better practices, or for businesses to do sourcing from farmers in a way that will empower the farmers in their communities. And the way we look at it is to use data as a form of incentivization, where everyone in the supply chain will become more profitable by shifting practices to greater transparency and greater impact. And so what that means is if we're in the middle of Kenya, and there's a farmer there of coffee, and we need to understand how that 1 acre farmer of coffee who doesn't have a cell phone is growing that food, harvesting it, then bringing it to a collection center, and that going to another aggregator. And we have to understand what are the practices used and what are the impacts that are generated by those practices. So what we're working on is a model that relies on agripreneurs or field extension agents, people who are already on the ground working with those farmers, building trusting relationships where they're already giving them capacity building and support services, microloans, and then empowering these field agents to capture data at the source. And for others to then validate that data input. So the way we're really looking at holding others accountable as a reflection of our own accountability is to look at data and the validation of data. The certifications, one after the other, doesn't guarantee integrity, doesn't guarantee authenticity. What guarantees it is peer-to-peer networks where farmers are holding other farmers accountable, where community members are holding other community members accountable. So what we've been working towards and now pioneering is a decentralized peer-to-peer model of data capture and validation. And ultimately, we believe this model is scalable and will allow us to keep companies accountable who are making their sustainability claims, but around 80% is that average of, let's say, food and beverage companies. 80% of their impacts come from their farmers. And yet they're so disconnected from their farmers, they don't have data on the practices and the impacts being generated at the source. So when companies are saying, we're going to hit net zero by 2030, 2040, 2050, they don't understand 80% of their impacts being generated today. So the first thing we need to do to hold people accountable is to understand what are the impacts that are being created, and ultimately, I'm consuming, and I'm buying from these brands, I'm buying from these stores. And so I'm also accountable to those impacts. So we're all connected, and I believe that providing incentives and providing benefits to do the right thing is going to be the accelerated format for scaling transition into better practices and better impacts.
Amazing, thank you. So rapid fire, last question. Super quick, what do you want everyone to take home with them after this COP? Satya?
They need to act. It's great to get together, and I for one truly believe that things get done when people meet, people connect, new ideas, new sparks, but it doesn't matter unless you do something with it. When you go back, think within your little sphere, that you find yourself in. Look at the possibilities, and you will find, we just catalyzed, we're a small organization out of New York, we just catalyzed 2 months ago a $2 billion investment to get a state in India, 55 million people, zero plastic pollution in 5 years. It was announced, and it was launched with 22,157 people present. World's largest beach cleanup. They picked up 74,000 kilos of plastic from the Visakhapatnam beach. It's possible in the power of ideas. It's possible in the power of partnerships. Don't think you can do everything yourself. Nobody can. Look around. Find different skill sets, different thought processes. Tolerate some, Don't think you are awesome. We're all awesome. But others are awesome too. Humility. Listening carefully to people will give us great ideas that actually can come to life, and it is possible. We're doing it every day, and you can too, and I'm sure you are doing your stuff, but it is in the power of partnerships that you can actually have catalytic impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Satya. Keith?
Yeah, so I heard earlier someone say in regards to capitalism and these kind of forces of economics that it is logically impossible. And I'm here to say that is illogically possible, because we can put forests onto buildings, we can make cities incredible places to live, work, and breathe. We can empower 6 million farmers. We can build communities where there's 200 fruits there. So we have to go well beyond what everyone around us is telling us is not going to work, is going to fail, because it's illogical, it's impossible, and it can't work. And we have to champion that and go for it. And just keep going for it until it does happen and everyone buys into it.
Full send. I love that.
Yeah, I would say, kind of taking off Satya, is just kind of stop blaming. It's so easy to blame the guy whose name rhymes with dump. We could blame the government. We can blame Monsanto. We can blame Dow Chemical. We can blame. But it's like, until we really start honing in on the things that we're buying and the companies that we're supporting and the ways that we're living, we're just part of that, And so, yeah, I just want to invite everybody to really, really just take the time and the space. Like, look in your garbage. Like, what are you producing in your garbage? How can you walk lighter? What are you supporting? How can you support, more local groups and people that you know and people in your community? What things are you ordering from Amazon? What can you replace them with? I would invite everybody to cancel your Amazon Prime subscription for a month and see how that feels. It's like, I visit the States, and that's the thing that rocks me the most. I cannot believe the amount of packages on people's doorsteps every day. I'm just like, wow, living in Costa Rica, it's like, wow, I cannot believe how easy it is to buy things now. So now we're just buying and buying more than we ever have. So yeah, I would just invite, people to really just, like what you're saying, it's like really just starts with us, and truly try your best, because that's all you can do.
Woo. One more.
Thank you. To accept that we can do it again better is already an important place to be. It's a humble recognition for change. And there is an energy, there's a feeling. And the awareness stages that we have gone through the last years that were this kind of a vision, idea of changing and improving are becoming and are materializing and are becoming tangible projects. So we went from wanting to needing change, and well, hope these ideas and these visions that we have can continue implementing and tangibilizing.
Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our host. That was such a hopeful and inspiring panel. Thank you, everyone. Tony?
Give it up for the future of cities.
Yeah, future of cities. Burr, burr, burr.
Thank you, Desiree. Thank you guys for a beautiful closing panel with so many insightful remarks. We love you guys. We want to continue. Look, you have a captive audience. They don't want to go anywhere. So you drew everybody's attention back in. I'm so honored and privileged to call you all friends and peers and contemporaries in this journey towards a regenerative future that we all know is possible. And you know, Buckminster Fuller also said a great quote that always inspired me. It says, if you want change, don't fight the existing system, you know, create a new system that makes the old system obsolete. And I think that's really, you know, one of my, you know, most inspiring sentiments around just kind of co-creating this new future that we're all doing together. So thank you for all your work. Really appreciate it. Let's do a photo. And then we have an incredible special guest that was supposed to be here earlier at a panel, but happened to be in the blue zone with the president of Colombia, Petro, who's doing a lot of work with indigenous folks and others. And so we will get a closing blessing from a friend of ours from the Amazon. So let's do a photo, and then after that, everybody gets to enjoy Ellie Light, our musical entertainer for the evening. Co-creating with you.
Well, we're not friends, but yeah, I know. That was wonderful. Where are you based?
I know, I do. Yeah.
I have a few places, but San Mateo, and then we have a spot in the shop. Come visit.
Claro que sí. Sí, de hecho. Sí, that's my third panel. You know? No. It's like, I don't know what to do.
Oi.
Hi, everyone. Again, for those who are outside, I would invite you to come in. We have a very special guest here to close our event in a very high note. So first, I would like to thank Tony again for the inspiration. Jimena, who's been always, I had the privilege to meet Jimena in the Amazon a couple of weeks ago, and now we are reunited in Egypt with one of the leaders that we most admire from the Amazon region, Wanda Witoto. She was mentioned earlier today. She was supposed to have joined us in the previous panel. Wanda, we've met a couple of months ago. I had a privilege to learn more about this amazing woman. She ran for office for the House of Representatives in the Amazon region in Brazil, in the state of Amazonas. She was very brave. She was the first indigenous woman to be vaccinated in Brazil for COVID. and she picked this fight, and she helped her communities around the whole country to be vaccinated, to be saved, and also to go back to their ancestral roots. So this has a lot to do with everything that we've just said here. She was not able to be here before because she went to the Blue Zone. She met with the other indigenous relatives, and they had a chance to talk to the General Secretary, to the President of Colombia. Wanda shared a very special thing with me today. Her community is called Witoto, and she was explaining to me that they actually come from Colombia. And there is a very small group of them who still live in Brazil, and she comes from the Brazilian Witoto family, but most of the Witotos live in Colombia, so it was a nice coincidence today that they were with the President of Colombia. So with that, I just want to thank Wanda. She arrived today. She's super tired, and still she made all her way here. She took a driver from the Blue Zone and came all the way because she wanted to say hi to us. So thank you, Wanda.
Thank you.
I will translate her. She wants to say a few words before she finished with the blessing, okay?
Peço licença às ancestrais que me antecederam para me dirigir a vocês.
I excuse myself to the ancestors who came before me so that I can direct my words to you.
Foram elas que me trouxeram aqui para trazer a mensagem da Amazônia e do coração da floresta e da terra.
They, these female ancestors, were those who brought me here to bring the messages from the ancestors, from nature and from earth.
Sou uma mulher indígena que vive no coração da Amazônia, onde nós temos a maior população indígena do país. E quero falar um pouquinho, para não ser longo, cheguei no final do evento, mas dizer da importância de estarmos aqui.
I'm an indigenous woman who lives in the heart of the Amazon, where the biggest community of indigenous people live. And I came at the end of this event, but I believe it's very important to me to be here, for all of us to be here, and that's why I want to direct my message to you.
Eu ouvi na última fala de que nós fazemos parte de um problema.
I heard in the last panel that we are all part of the same problem.
Mas também nós seremos os únicos que possamos trazer a solução para o que enfrentamos.
But we are also the only ones that can bring the solution to what we are facing today.
São as pessoas. São as pessoas que podem transformar as suas ações e trazer mudanças para que haja possibilidade do nosso futuro.
People are the ones who can change their actions so that we have possibilities for a new or for a future.
E nós, povos indígenas, há milhares de anos, nossos abuelos, com seus conhecimentos ancestrais, têm cuidado da floresta, dos rios e do planeta.
We, indigenous people, with our grandparents, we are the ones who have been here in this world for centuries, taking care of the forests, of the rivers, of the people in our planet.
O que acontece é que os governantes, as grandes corporações, não me escutam nossas vozes.
What happens is that governments and big corporations are not listening to us, to our voices.
Nossa voz, ela vem de uma relação profunda com a natureza e a escuta sensível da Mãe Terra.
Our voices come from a very deep relationship with nature and a very deep listening to our Mother Earth.
Nós temos sofrido bastante por tentar defender, por defender os nossos territórios no Brasil. Nossas lideranças têm sido assassinadas em nossos territórios
por proteger a floresta, o território e a nossa biodiversidade.
Our people are suffering a lot in Brazil for protecting our land. We are being killed for protecting nature, forests, and our everything that we are protecting.
O mundo precisa dar atenção a vozes dessas populações.
The world needs to pay attention and listen to the voices of these populations.
E queremos participar também das decisões que têm afetado as nossas vidas.
And we also want to participate in the decisions that are affecting our lives.
Nós estamos num movimento para ocupar os espaços de tomada de decisão, para que nenhuma decisão seja tomada sem a nossa participação.
We are in a movement to occupy decision-making spaces so that decisions are no longer taken without our participation.
E é a partir desses conhecimentos ancestrais que queremos contribuir para que o mundo tenha a possibilidade de existência e de futuro.
And it's from our ancestral knowledge that we want to contribute so that the world has a chance of existence of a future.
Os caminhos é o diálogo. O caminho é a possibilidade de construirmos ponte para encontrarmos as soluções comuns para todos, visando o bem desta humanidade.
Dialogue is the way. Building bridges is the way for us to build together the solutions for our society.
Para encerrar a minha participação, trarei um canto dos nossos avós para esfriar o coração da terra e dos homens que propõem guerra.
To end my contribution, I will sing a song that can help us to cool the hearts of the earth and the men who are fighting so much.
Itoma, bidu, boineima, bidu, hitoma, bidu, anana enyo, boinanyo naru, bida ipika, kaipona, bidu. Hitoma, bidu, boinaima, bidu, hitoma, bidu, anana enyo, boinainyo naru, bida ipika, kaipona, bidu. Hairi de Quená. Muito obrigado.
Thank you.